I'm going to combine two messages here. First of all, Wadad, thank you so much for your hospitality. It is always fun to come to Bozeman, and it is a few challenging days in a certain regard, but I know that you feel the same way when you come to Missoula, and the fun ribbing that goes back and forth is a wonderful thing, and it contributes so much to who we are in Montana. So, Wadad, thank you. I've had now chocolate and a waffle and ice cream, all very difficult for a Grizz to eat, but thanks very much. The second message I want to do in all seriousness, I want to say thank you to the absolutely superb contingent of students who are here. We have this year one of the most active and vibrant student governments that we've ever had. We've had great leaders, Asa being one of them right here. All of our ASUM leaders have been terrific. This year students are especially engaged in the process, and so we have such a strong group. I want them to stand and let me thank them for being here and for their active involvement. But then I think they do have a message for you, Dr. Cruzado. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. So let's begin where we left off yesterday, and we're now at that point in the agenda where we'll turn it over to the Staff and Compensation Committee, and for that, I will turn it over to the committee chair, Regent Johnstone.
Thank you, Chair Tuss, and welcome and good morning to everyone. As you can see, the agenda for the Staff and Compensation Committee consists only of consent items. And before I ask members of the committee and members of the board whether they would like to move any of the consent items, first of all, I'd like to ask Commissioner Christian to comment on item E under staff items.
Chair Johnstone, be more than happy to do that. I was struck on Wednesday driving over here that there is no board member currently on the board that was here when the president was hired, although only 5 years ago. And so I just wanted to take a minute, more than even talking about the item, just sort of let the board know how we got to where we were at. And it's been reported on a bit, and I'd actually say when you read the articles, it's been reported quite fairly. But you know, when we looked at this 5 years ago, we were in a situation where our current compensation levels were at about 58% of comparator groups, a high of 62% comparator groups, depending on which group you chose. And we were actually at about somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 below the surrounding states, what they were currently paying, the Dakotas, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana included in that. And so we were really quite concerned with what we were going to do. And we still remained 50 to 100 below what those other states were paying at where we thought we could get. And we knew, though, that if we were going to get a high quality person, one that I think can do the type of things that we're asking to do, and I will say candidly, the type of things that I believe are going on this campus now, driving graduation rates, driving retention, student success, time to degree, all the issues that have really been elevated as board priorities, balancing the right amount of investment in faculty, raising record levels of private donations. I mean, those are the kind of things that we knew that we needed to compete for. And so we really sort of felt like, well, we've got to look outside the box a bit to get to a number that can attract that sort of candidate. And I'm not here to argue relative value in those. I mean, that's kind of a debate that could go on forever. I understand the compensation levels, but they sort of are what they are, right? And if we were going to compete in that market, we felt like we needed to get to a spot that we could do that. And so we looked at what some other states were starting to do, and a lot of them were moving to sort of this deferred comp. It obviously allows compensation in addition to base pay, which could be funded over a period of time at a little less cost to the institution. We tried to sort of think outside the box, and with our good performance funding, sort of how do we get people to stay hat on? We looked at ways we could do that. I mean, one of the things that we were facing at the time was the certainty that both presidents were leaving, the commissioner was leaving, 4 out of 5 of our chancellors had turned over, not to mention the fact none of you are here demonstrates the turnover on the board. So we really felt like could we tie those together in a kind of creative Montana way? So we took a deferred comp mindset that other states had used, and we put in there a condition that was only vested if the candidate would stay for 5 years. And that leads us to today's item. That 5 years has passed. That compensation plan is vested. I would simply say it wasn't a bonus. It wasn't a signing bonus. We talked about some of those options. Those are very challenging to administer in many ways. We just really looked at it as compensation in the only way we could pay that compensation. And so we get to today where there's an item before you, which is really a continuance of that compensation plan. And I want to make that very clear. If we do anything less than this, to a president that I think has met those leadership attributes that I laid out before, then that actually would be a reduction in pay. So I quite easily bring this request to you with highest regards and highest support for those. But I just wanted to give you a little background of how we got to where we were at, and why that was created, and the need to continue this unless our message is that we're sending a pay cut out, and I don't think any of us think that's the right thing to do. It is a plan that would continue with the plan we had before. It's 5 years of service, would ultimately vest this deferred comp program.
Thank you, Commissioner Christian. Do any board members have any questions with respect to that? If not, then let's move to the labor agreements. And again, before I ask whether anybody would like to remove any items, I'd like Deputy Commissioner McCray to give us an overview of where we stand and some context with respect to those. Deputy Commissioner.
Certainly, Chairman Johnstone. Once the labor agreements come before the committee, and if the board approves the labor agreements, we will have settled either through ratified approval or tentative agreement half of the labor agreements in the system. So we have almost brought half of them before the board thus far through this agenda. There are a couple of tentative agreements that will be coming on the consent agenda in January, but the bottom line is we have settled about half of the agreements in the system that cover probably 3/4 of the total faculty and staff in collective bargaining units. So we're on track. We're on a good pace getting contracts settled, and we'll continue to keep negotiating. We have great bargaining teams across the system on both the labor side and the board side. A lot of cooperative work going on there. And these agreements on this agenda, like the agreements that you approved in September, contain compensation adjustments for faculty and staff for classified hourly staff in the amount of 50-cent per hour raises that would take effect in January, this coming January and the following January. And then for the faculty agreements that you approved in September and that are on this agenda, they would provide for salary adjustments of either $780 on the base salary or 2%, whichever is greater. And those adjustments take effect January and January. So that's the parameter consistent with the board's prior approval and the agenda items today that we're moving forward with.
Thank you. Does any board member have any questions with respect to that? There's one other item on the consent agenda, the emeriti faculty at Winger. Does anybody, so let me ask right now, would any board member or any committee member, let's start with the committee, like to move anything off the consent agenda? Any board member? Hearing none, I think we can move forward. And maybe a final comment. The time spent by a committee is not a reflection of the importance of the committee's work. We do important work, we just do it very efficiently. So I'll turn it back to you. Thank you, Chair Tuss.
Thank you, Regent Johnstone. We are now at a point where we do have a break, and then our next official board item, we are going to have Senator Tester here with us today. I know that Senator Tester is not here yet, so I'm curious about whether or not we should perhaps take that break, or if we should move to the Budget Committee. Commissioner, do you have a preference?
Mr. Chair, we can easily move into the Budget Committee. We just sort of got started. If you want to break, fine, but otherwise I would say we go to Budget, and we can pause when the senator gets here and hear his good words, and then take a break right after he's finished.
Okay, let's do that. If we're prepared to move to the Budget Committee, I think that would be appropriate. So let me turn that over to the Budget Committee Chair, Regent Albrecht.
Thank you. Good morning. Members of the Administrative Budget and Audit Oversight Committee, are there any items on the consent agenda that you would like pulled? Okay. Seeing none, we will move to the action items of this agenda, and I would like to turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Mick Robinson to provide us with a review.
Madam Chair, I'm going to ask Mike Reed, Vice President Mike Reed from Missoula, to provide a little bit of an overview on action item A. In fact, Mike will be speaking to A, B, and C as we move through.
The University of Montana is requesting authority to enter into a energy performance contract with McKinstry Ascension Incorporated. This item was presented to the committee and to the board in the September board meeting. The university is desirous to upgrade the building's automated controls in the Lomason Center. Much of the building has overlapping systems and controls that do not communicate with each other. This means that we're heating and cooling the building at the same time, and oftentimes the building is heating and cooling 24/7 rather than just the times when the building is occupied. The estimated savings of this change would be anticipated at approximately $100,000 annually and will be used to pay the debt portion of the project. The total project cost is not to exceed $1.2 million, and a loan of $210,000 will be needed to complete the funding of the project. Any financial agreement would be based on a term not to exceed 3 years, and I'd be happy to address any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Reed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead and move on to item B.
Okay. Item B, the University of Montana is requesting authority to complete the shelled-out space of the basement of the Adams Center. The original project was approved by the board in June of 2013. The project was originally designed to prepare the basement for future construction. The space would be developed into additional locker and dressing rooms, and the space would accommodate large-scale events that are currently restricted with only 2 available dressing rooms. The new construction will provide an additional 4 locker rooms and 4 additional dressing rooms. Additionally, the space will provide multi-use space because the space is able to open up and be turned into major or larger rooms. The total project cost is estimated at $1.5 million and will require $1 million in financing through an intercap loan or other potential lending opportunities. Funds to cover the debt service would be through a $1 per ticket facility venue fee, in addition to the annual revenue earnings of approximately $20,000 annually. I stand for any questions.
Any questions from any members of the board? Chair Tuss.
Thank you. Could you go over that again? There's a $1 fee. I didn't quite hear you.
Madam Chair,
that
Chair
portion of
Tuss, correct. There would be a $1 per ticket facility venue fee that would be added. So if you purchase a ticket to attend a concert, in addition to the cost of the venue or to the performance, there would be a $1 facility fee added to that ticket. So it would be paid for by participants of any concerts or venues that come to the Adams Center.
Does that fee, is that fee paid by everybody that attends that particular event, including students?
Correct. Anybody that purchases a ticket would have that fee attached.
Have students been consulted about this? Have they been in the loop on the conversation about this issue?
I don't believe they have.
Okay.
And as a follow-up to that, is this an additional fee on top of that, or is that, was that already incorporated into and diverted into that for this particular purpose?
That would be an additional fee that would be added.
Okay.
Now, these are different than, for example, the typical mandatory or non-mandatory fees that come towards the board. This is really associated with the price of a venue. It's fairly common to add different charges to different venues as they come in, but this would be a new $1 assessment on those venue fees.
Regent Holman.
Madam Chair, just I think to note, I appreciate the question on behalf of students there, but I think to note that these are just tickets for any show at the Adams Center, not specifically for students. And so in that situation, I think it's not inappropriate.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item? Regent Nystuen.
Are there any other fees, thank you, Madam Chair, are there any other fees that are already associated with this? So in other words, this is $1 on top of another fee that's already out there for this type, or is this brand new?
Madam Chair, Regent Nystuen, yes, there are other fees that are associated to this. So when the Adams Center negotiates for a concert, for example, when Paul McCartney was able to come to the University of Montana, there is a ticket price that the promoter is asking to sell the tickets for. Additionally, then the venue is able to add additional fees to that. There may be a charge for, say, $3 per ticket for the sell of the ticket. If you're going to sell it through Grizz Tix or Smith Tix or those type of venues, they add a ticket fee on top of that. There's oftentimes a venue fee that would be the charge to rent the facility that's also added to those tickets. So it's fairly common to have a listing of tickets. The purchaser of the ticket oftentimes will see a breakout of those fees, but it's part of the ticket price. So if you look up and you see that it's going to cost $75 to attend the venue, that's inclusive of all of those fees.
Regent Johnstone.
Yes, thank you. Do you have an estimate of the revenue that you expect to receive from the charge? I mean, have you done some sort of a pro forma on this?
Madam Chair, Regent Johnstone, a lot of it depends on the venue and it's what's coming in, but it's approximately about $100,000 in total annually. And again, that depends on the size of the venues that we're bringing in. One of the things that we hope that we're able to do with these larger dressing rooms and facilities is to bring in larger venues, which would impact the revenue as well.
Chair Tuss.
Thank you, Regent Albrecht. This board has had many, many conversations about fees during my tenure on here, when they can come to the board, when they can't come to the board, how big they can be. And so maybe this is a question for the Deputy Commissioner. Given that this is a fee, it isn't a student-led fee or a student-driven fee. It's coming to us from the administration. Is this different than something that we would typically ask the campuses only to bring to us every 2 years in May?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, yes, it is. It's on the campuses, they certainly have auxiliary enterprises that focus on students, room and board issues, but there are also some activities that are focused, for the most part, in many cases, on non-student audiences, whether it be a football game, certainly students are part of that, or an entertainment venue that would come into the campus. And the fees connected with that are really driven by a policy that, Board of Regents policy, that indicates that the campus needs to charge fees that are sufficient to cover the costs of those particular activities. And so it's really more of an enterprise activity for the campus in terms of making sure that they at least break even, if not make money on those activities. It's part of sort of a revenue-producing entrepreneurship that we would see on many campuses.
Commissioner Christian.
If I could add to that, Madam Chair, That's exactly right. What I would add is that it is not uncommon that if we have a new project or construction of this nature, that there is a fee set then. The conversation you're talking about is we do ask that fee increases on established fees only come to the board every other year in May following a legislative session, and we've been pretty much towed the line on that. But this is fairly common in new projects, new construction, something like that, where there's an associated auxiliary fee too.
And if, go ahead.
I just have a follow-up on that. So can we have an example of the difference? I'm assuming a good example that comes to my mind would be the student health fee, for instance. Is that a good example of something that can only come to us every 2 years versus something like this that is, as you mentioned, Deputy Commissioner, more entrepreneurial in nature?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that would be a good example. That would be an example of one of the mandatory fees that a campus would charge to all of the students. And I think that's one of the key differences in terms of charging across the student body. Mandatory fees or course fees will come to the board, or to be coming to the board once every 2 years.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I just want to comment that on this particular item, a nominal $1 increase, which will be spread throughout the folks who are attending these venues, really allows for a return on investment to be able to remain competitive with the events, to be able to draw those. And so I'm very supportive of this. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Can we move on to the next item?
Yes. Third item, the university is requesting authorization to enter into a lease agreement with the Mantecato Fire District. I've been dreading this. I have not yet figured out how to say that. I'm assuming it's Mantecato. This would allow them to construct a facility to house a new fire truck. The agreement would not exceed 20 years, and the consideration for the lease is the benefit of having the protective services on site. The property is 1.24 acres, and it's right at the entrance of the Flathead Biological Station entrance.
Any questions from members of the board? I have one question regarding the liability of the station, or of this, sorry.
Sure, Madam Chair. The
storage building, pardon me.
Sure. It would be a brick structure that the fire department would be liable for. The agreement would have, the lease agreement that we'd enter into with the fire department would require all of the indemnifications that we would do on any property or any user of a state property.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Thank you.
Okay, item D.
Chair Albrecht, Vice President Terry Least will be walking us through this particular item.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for letting me speak to you for a few moments about this item. For the record, my name is Terry Least. I'm the Vice President for Administration and Finance at Montana State University. Today we seek your support and approval for authorization to design and construct a new dining hall on our campus, to adopt resolutions for the issuance of facilities revenue bonds, and to authorize MSU and the Commissioner of Higher Education to issue debt for this project in an amount up to $6 million. First of all, I'd like to provide some information about our existing dining halls. Thank you for joining us for breakfast this morning. Miller Dining Hall, Miller Dining Commons is an excellent example of what a dining hall can be or could be. We're very proud of that. It's been renovated over the last couple of years, opened up to rave reviews this August to our students. It was expanded by about 100 seats to 720 capacity, and the seating is now much more efficient. We have these 2 and 4 table configurations versus 8 table configurations, and that's just more efficient because once a couple of people sit down, oftentimes other students won't join them. So even though we had capacity before, it wasn't as well utilized as we would have liked. Harrison Dining Hall is on the north edge of campus, seats about 435. This is a 60-year-old facility, and to Regent Nye students' comments yesterday, this is a perfect example of what our students' grandparents experienced. Hasn't changed much in that time period. Servery area is small, causes delays and congestion. The equipment has far exceeded its useful life, et cetera. And I mean, another important point about this dining hall is that the entry point is through Johnstone Center, so it provides somewhat of a security risk to our residence halls that also enter through there. We prefer that the people entering the dining halls did not have access to our residence halls directly. Hannon Dining Hall is our smallest residential dining hall. It's on the northeast portion of campus. Sits about 300 people. And again, it's small enough where we can't provide capacity without these 8-table configurations, 8-person table. So, and then there's just one single servery line. So the options that we can provide our students are very limited. This dining hall is located inside of our Hannon residence hall, so there's direct access to that residence hall for people who visit the dining facility. So that's a security risk that we would like to change. So 2 years ago, we came before this board, and the intent was to renovate all 3 dining halls over a 3 to 4 year period. And you can see the results that we've had with the Miller Dining Commons. And while it may not be, the first reason we would like to make a change at this point, I guess after reconsidering, is that our growth has certainly continued. Student enrollment has increased, but more importantly, at the residence halls themselves, we're up about 10% or 300 and some students in addition. The patrons to our dining halls have increased about 16%. So we're now serving close to 11,000 meals a day. That's 1.6 million meals a year. It's a phenomenal, staggering figure. And the popularity of Miller Dining Hall has been overwhelming in a very positive way. So about 75% of our meals are served right now this fall out of that facility. So, you know, it was designed to serve 50 to 60%. So there's a lot of challenges in managing that. Unfortunately, Harrison and Hannon dining halls, to bring them up to a similar level of service would be challenging, if not impossible, at their current locations. So rather than invest heavily in these last 2, Harrison and Hannon, and likely not achieve an optimal outcome, we would like to propose that we redirect our current resources, including some cost savings that we're going to have on the residence hall that we're opening next fall, along with the bond proceeds that we received 2 years ago, and combine that with some low-interest debt to build a new dining hall. Now, we know we need to do something soon, and I do truly believe that this is the best option. It may not be obvious, but the look and the feel, the equipment, the seating arrangements, all of these things play an important role in what students eat, how they eat, et cetera. We certainly take a lot of pride in evaluating the nutrition and quality of our food. And having modern facilities gives us a great step forward in that area. So again, I think a new dining hall would serve us best for the long-term needs, not only for our students, but for the campus as a whole. It's supported very much by the strong financial position that our MSU Auxiliary Services Unit is in right now. And interest rates are low, and we have some prior debt that will be paid off here soon. And so, you know, when this building would open in a couple of years, our debt service would actually be a little less than we are in our current year. So it's there's no need for additional debt service at this point. And finally, 2 dining halls we feel would be a much more efficient operation going forward than operating 3. There's certainly some overhead costs, et cetera, that we could save there. So appreciate your time this morning and your consideration for this proposal. I do think, similar to Miller, it will define the student experience and the efficiency that we're able to offer going forward. So I stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Regent Johnstone.
Yes. I assume the reference to grandparents was to me, and I'm pleased to learn that the security concerns with respect to Johnstone Hall didn't affect more because of Johnstone, so that makes me feel better. My question, I guess, is I've looked at your pro forma spreadsheet. Are you satisfied that with this additional debt, that you're going to have sufficient funds to cover deferred maintenance, et cetera?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Regent Johnstone, yes, because of, well, the debt that when we came 2 years ago, and we were estimating what our debt payments would be, okay? We didn't know exactly how those were going to be until the actual bonds were issued, et cetera. So over this first 3 years, it's almost $3 million, 2.9 some million dollars that is less than we had anticipated. So we've got that $3 million. We're continuing to do these repair and replacement, you know, the O&M, keeping up our other facilities and making investments of those. In addition, we have additional students, and that's helped a great deal. And with the debt falling off here in a couple of years, by the time this one would open, we're quite confident that our continued maintenance program will continue.
And then just one other question. Have you consulted with council on it? You can move the money from the purpose, the excess funds from the residence hall to this purpose?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Regent Johnstone, yes, we have been working with bond counsel on that, and certainly want to seek your approval to do that, but everything else has been taken care of. Thank you. That's a great question.
Thank you. Regent Sheehy.
So we're going from 3 food services to 2, is that correct?
Madam Chair and Regent Sheehy, that is the desire, yes.
And what will happen to the facilities? Are we abandoning them? Are we repurposing? What are we doing with the other 2?
Madam Chair and Regent Sheehy, yeah, that's a great question. We'll have a couple of years to figure out exactly how to do that, but certainly not going to abandon them. We'll put them to very good use. You know, the smaller one in Hannon Hall will probably stay with auxiliary services in some capacity. Harrison is much larger, and so that could be used. We could convert that to academic space. We could use it for other things. So we have a process on campus for our space management committee and recommendations to the president. And if there's any, significant renovations that would need to be done there, we'd have to, we'd come back to the board and talk to you about that before we did it.
Any further questions? Commissioner Christian?
Madam Chair, I would just say it's a significant investment, and the good president and Mr. Lease can tell you, Deputy Commissioner Robinson and I certainly looked at this very intently, and the change that is proposed. I actually started in probably a different spot, but think it's a very good plan, and it does serve students in the end, and it will really enhance the student experience. And we've spent a tremendous amount of time on, Regent Johnstone, your question of sort of the viability of the plan and moving the money and those things. And I think it has certainly been through the works at the Commissioner's office, and we would recommend this project move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Christian. Any further questions? Thank you for your hospitality this morning. Certainly much more different experience than my undergraduate days.
Mine too, Madam Chair.
I'm concerned that students won't go home for Thanksgiving, but certainly glad that the nourishment factor is there and the student experience. No, it's really remarkable. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Commissioner's office. They have been a great help in this process. Thank you.
So we will be moving these action items for consideration for vote for approval later this morning. At this point, we can move on to the information items. Deputy Commissioner Robinson. Commissioner Christian.
Madam Chair, we've asked Dawson Community College to bring you an update. As all of you recall at the last meeting, there's certainly some concerns raised, and we said from my office that at the appropriate level, certainly acknowledging their local board of trustees, that we would try to give you some assurance that we are spending some time looking into this matter. Deputy Commissioner Robinson and SEC both made a trip to Glendive and spent time on the campus evaluating the plans from our appropriate level, I believe. And then President Nix, his chief academic officer, and a group of us met in the commissioner's office. They were gracious enough to make a trip over, and so we really have spent some time with this. I've talked to President Elm with the Northwest accreditors to make certain that we're in the right direction. I would say that after at least our high-level review, they are in need of a plan, and this is a plan. I have to say, as plans go, time is sort of the final adjudicator of all plans, right? And we have to see how it works out, but I think they've tried to take a comprehensive look at this, preserve the academic integrity of the institution, and I know that Northwest accreditors will be following them closely through that process as well. But we have President Nix here and Board Chair Chad Knutson to speak to you. I will tell you from my perspective, the sort of one recommendation, if we could, and certainly we will leave the governance of that campus and this decision that I will mention to those trustees. But I think all that have participated in this conversation from your office, the Commissioner's office, is that they need to make sure that they do what they can to sort of solidify the leadership and direction. I think they've certainly been through some leadership changes, and that sort of tends to ebb and flow in different directions. And so I think solidifying behind a leadership plan will allow this plan to sort of coalesce over time and be a track that they stay on. I don't think that starting new plans on an annual basis will serve them very well. And so I would say that we find that as a sort of an important suggestion, knowing that their local trustees will ultimately need to make those decisions. But thank you both for being here, and anxious to have you give the board an update.
Madam Chair, Deputy Commissioner, Regents, colleagues, thank you again for this opportunity. Chairman Knutson will begin the presentation with an overview of where Dawson is coming from, and then I will step in and give some updates on specifics.
Do you mind if I interrupt you just for a minute here? Senator Tester is here, and if you don't mind, if we, based on the schedule, I know that we were ahead of schedule, and we've scheduled Senator Tester for a particular time on the agenda. If you don't mind, we can take care of that piece of business and come back to this one if that's acceptable to you.
We are happy to yield the floor to the senator, yes.
Thank you. Well, it's certainly my extreme pleasure to have Montana's senior United States Senator with us today. Senator Tester has always been a wonderful supporter of the Montana University system in his time in the Montana State Senate, and certainly during his time in the United States Senate. And we're just so pleased, Senator, that you have time in your schedule to be with us today. So welcome to the Montana Board of Regents.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman Tuss. I appreciate it. Look, I apologize to Dawson. I do. Sorry about that, guys. But you'll do what you need to do here. I was looking at the sheet before I came in here yesterday as I was flying in, and I just want to thank the Board of Regents. What a great group of leaders from all across Montana serve on this very, very important committee. And I just want to thank you for your service to, in my opinion, probably the most important part of our economy as far as driving it for the future, and that's higher ed. I just want to thank you for your dedication to improving education in Montana, and we all know why you're here too, is for the game tomorrow, but that's okay, you know. Look, things have changed. Things have changed in my lifetime quite a bit, and I guess I still consider myself to be young, although when I look at the calendar, I'm not. I've got a couple older brothers. When they were in college in the 60s, their higher education bill for going to college was affordable. When I went in the 70s, it was still affordable, but it had changed. And then in the 80s and 90s, it changed a lot more, and it's unfortunate. I think that back in the 60s, higher education was looked as a public good, and for whatever reasons over the years, it became more of a personal good than a public good, and so quite frankly, When it was a public good, more of that tuition was paid for by the taxpayer, the state. And that has changed over the last 30 years or better. And now more and more is being put on the students. And it is having an incredibly dragging effect, I believe, on our economy. Might not be as noticeable now as it's going to be 10, 15, 20 years from now. Montana students are graduating with an average debt of about $27,000. Everybody sitting around this table probably knows that. You guys are one of the better buys in the country, quite frankly. You do it better than probably almost any other state. But the fact is when we send our kids out with debt loads that are that high, it removes their ability to make choices on where they're going to work or if they're going to move on past the bachelor's. And quite frankly, those have very, very devastating long-term impacts on our economy. So I would just tell you that I want to thank you for what you do, and I will work with you any way I can to make sure that college becomes more affordable, because I think if there's any difference between my generation and this generation, it's the amount of debt, and there are a lot of differences, the amount of debt our kids are coming out with. So just thank you for what you do. I think Royce has had to make some tough decisions this week. I just talked to the chancellor at Eastern no, I shouldn't say that, MSU Billings last week, and he was doing some of the same things. And so I just want to say thank you for what you do. I can tell you what I'm doing is I'm going to start with Pell Grants. You guys know the stats. Low-income, non-traditional students, it takes them longer than 8 semesters to finish their degree. Why? Because they're working. And so I'm trying to expand Pell, the number of semesters from 12 to 15, and the amount they can receive from 6 to 9,000. Right now, Pell Grants cover the least amount of college education they have since they were established. Only 1/3 of the cost. That's unacceptable. I think we need to move forward. It's something that we can do at the federal level that can help you do your job, training the next set of leaders and training the next set of businessmen and entrepreneurs. I think in addition to year-round Pell, simplifying the financial process with FAFSA. Right now, they're applying for financial aid through their family's most recent tax filings. That doesn't often match up with the school year. We have pushed the Department of Education to allow students to submit tax information from the previous 2 years prior to enrollment when applying to FAFSA. My understanding is the Department of Education is going to do that starting the 16-17 school year. And I think that will be a very, very good thing for our students as far as planning goes, so they will know what aid they're eligible for earlier and can plan for that. Finally, Perkins loans. I was just visiting with one of the Rotary clubs in town this morning, and Perkins loans, and the person, as was usual in the Senate, and you don't have this kind of deal as at the Regents, but we've got a few people holding this up, and I actually like the people who are holding up Perkins loans. But the fact is that it has expired. Over 500,000 students have benefited from this. 3,000 students attending the Montana University system. The House actually passed an extension. The Senate's screwing it up, and it hurts me to say that. But we are going to continue to try to fight for Perkins loans. Why? Because once again, it helps folks who can least afford to go to school, those low-income folks, young men and women who should have that opportunity to benefit from higher education. And so we need to do everything we can do on that front also. Just in closing, and then if you guys have anything you'd like to ask about, it's fine. I am one of those people, and I think I know everybody around this table, that understands the importance of higher education. It is an investment just like we invest in roads and bridges or water systems or whatever it might be. It's our mental infrastructure. And if we don't do our very best to make things affordable at all levels, I know this is a challenge for the Board of Regents, it's also a challenge at the state level, and it's a challenge at the federal level. If we don't do everything we can do to make sure that college is affordable, we're going to shortchange our economy into the future. I know that as a former teacher. I know that as a parent and as a grandparent, as my grandkids now, in a few short years, will probably be attending one of these schools that are sitting around this table or at the side tables. So I just want to say to you, oftentimes in Congress, we are making decisions on subjects that we don't have as high a level of expertise as we should. We need good information. And I would say, as far as the Montana delegation goes, please feel free to give us that good information. I think it's critically important when we're making decisions, and quite frankly, it gives us the ability to go back and say, look, when you're challenged, you can say, look, this is why we did it, and list several reasons why. The benefits are real, the benefits are tangible, and it really is, in my opinion, time for Congress to step up and do their part, and we will be fighting for that as we move forward through this school year and into the next. With that, I'm going to end where I started. Thank you for what you do. I think this is a great group of leaders in the state, and being led by one Paul Tuss, who our relationship has gone back farther than either one of us want to admit to, but it's always been positive, I hope. Thank you all for what you do. Any questions?
Thank you, Senator Tester. Yes, it has been positive. And thank you for fighting. Thank you for fighting for higher education throughout this country, and certainly for Montana and the Montana University system and the students of this system. It's noticeable and it's appreciated. Commissioner Christian?
Senator Tester, just like to also, from my office, extend our tremendous gratitude for your efforts on higher education, your interest in higher education, and your accessibility. You mentioned us reaching out to you. I have to say, lots of people make that offer, but you actually pick up the phone every time I've ever tried to get a hold of you on any issue, and that's simply amazing with the schedule you keep, so thank you very much. I do have a question. You mentioned year-round Pell, and of course you know better than I how important Pell is to Montana in particular. Summer Pell certainly would allow students to stay on track, and that's an important piece to us. I guess your thoughts on that, and then whether that could come forward outside of the Higher Education Act reauthorization, or where you see it fitting in.
It's also in the package that I'm pushing forward with the bill that increases the number of semesters. They would also be eligible for summer Pell, which is critically important for part-time students. And I think that as we look to make education affordable and also make it so it's you can get through the door and finish up. Summer Pell is really, really important, and it's part of this package. And I think that what it's going to take at the federal level is going to take an understanding that education is pretty damn important in this country. I always tell the story about my grandmother coming here from Sweden for education. I tell the story about my mother and her sisters in the 30s were required to go to school by my grandmother. That wasn't an option. And I can tell you, I see that somewhat slipping away. And part of it is, quite frankly, there's opportunities out there. And if you're a kid in high school and you're looking at moving forward and you're looking at coming out of college with $27,000 in debt, and somebody's offering you more money than you've ever seen, you might think that's a good thing. But we all know that education is something that can never be taken away and is with you for a lifetime, and a lifetime of earnings. So the quicker you can get it, the better off you are. And the more flexibility, then better quality of life you're going to have moving forward. So I get why students do what they do, but I really think that there needs to be more emphasis in this country on the importance of education for our economy. I think it's what's kept us a leader in the world during my lifetime and before, and it will keep us a leader as long as we have an educated society that can help move our economy forward.
Thank you. Again, thank you for your tremendous support.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Tester. Regent Nystuen?
Thank you, Chair Tuss. Senator, thank you for your good words this morning. Being a rookie regent, I kind of set out to visit as many campuses as I could before this meeting here. I've been to about 10 campuses, especially the 2 years schools and so forth. And from boots on the ground, I tell you, it's amazing to see the impact of like the TAC grants in a number of our schools here. to see the equipment that they've been able to bring in, modern milling, machining types of equipment, the welding, the types of programs. I'm just blown away by how creative our institutions have been in being able to attract the right type of equipment, plus the faculty to be able to administer it and so forth. So a lot of times I think that you and your colleagues don't hear enough from us about the work that you do and the impact it has. The students that are enrolled in those campuses, they're there during the evenings and weekends and taking courses, and you know what? That equates to jobs, and that creates to economic prosperity. So we can never underestimate the impact of, especially like the TAC grants and others. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. And I agree with you 100%. I think that it needs to be communicated how important these are. And I know that every campus here today has invited us to be there, and I think I've been to every one of them, and I'm going to come back again to see what has been done, whether it's through NIH funding or National Science Foundation funding or TAC grants or whatever it might be. These are all important, and it's about working together to make sure the experience that the student gets is top flight, cutting edge, and to make sure that it's affordable and accessible.
President Engstrom.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Senator Tester, thanks for being here this morning, and I want to say a special thanks for all the things that you have done for us. Like Commissioner Christian, I am always amazed when the phone rings and it's your name popping up there, and I so appreciate those notes of congratulations and so on. I want to publicly thank you for what you've done for our veteran students. A few years ago, you and your staff worked with our staff to improve the way that we interact with veteran students on our campus. And because of that, I'm proud to tell you that last week on the football field, the veterans presented the university with what they call Purple Heart University status, a very special designation given by the students and the former students. And that probably would not have happened had it not been for the interest that you showed a few years ago in our veteran students. So thanks very much for that.
Yeah, thanks, Royce. Congratulations on that, and we have got some great vet centers. Your campus, the one here at Bozeman with Brenda's, does great. It's in around, you know, we've cut ribbons on a lot of these places. Up in Kalispell a year or two ago, we cut one up at Flathead Valley, and it's so good that we're paying attention to that. Why? Because these folks are coming back, and we make good soldiers, but we don't do as good a job making them back into civilians again. And the university system can be a big part of that, and I think you are. And I want to congratulate every campus here on their works that they've done to be able to integrate veterans into the student body.
President Cruzado.
Yes. Senator Tester, I also want to thank you for being there for our student veterans at Montana State University. Yours is a name that they easily recognize, and they know that you have always been there for them. I also want to thank you for your help in allowing Montana State University getting our TRIO grant back. And these are the stories that we seldom get to share, but 5 years ago, because of a fluke in the scores, we lost the TRIO grant after 30-some years at Montana State University. And it's such an incredible program that we desperately need to positively impact our Native American students. And at that time, Senator Tester was there with us, hand to hand, going through the review process. And since that was not possible at that time, he has been with us now. And this time we have a very happy ending, and I want to thank you for that support.
Thanks, Wadid. I appreciate that. Look, you guys offer a good product. You do it right. It's not hard to advocate on behalf of what you guys are trying to accomplish.
Regent Albert.
Senator Tester, it's great to see you. Thank you for being here this morning.
Good to see you, Fran.
I want to thank you for your work with veterans, and I would, in particular, like to thank you for your work with, especially with their health care needs, and trying to explore some increases in residency. As you are probably aware, we are taking a very close look at our at other opportunities to meet our healthcare needs, and especially throughout the rural areas in Montana. And I'd like to know where you are with opportunities that you see at your level to really help us to address this need, particularly with these residencies.
Yep, that's a great question. We're trying to increase slots with CMS. Those are residency slots for the training of doctors on the ground, and we're also working with the VA to bump up their number of slots, which also coincides with CMS because they have to fund them some 1,500 dedicated mostly to rural America. I think this is critically important as we're moving forth to make sure we get docs trained in places like Montana, which are rural, so that they'll stick around. We're also working with the VA right now on a way we can get more physician's assistants into their system by utilizing medical personnel that come out of the military and making it a little more user-friendly for their training to get to PA status. I have visited extensively with WADED and Royce on some medical school issues here that I know you guys have talked about and we'll talk about again. I would just say I think the reason for it is all the right reasons. I just think you just need to make sure, and I've told WADED this, you need to make sure we have the medical community on board supporting it, because they're going to be one of the keys to making it successful. But there is no doubt we need more docs, we need more nurses, we need more medical professionals, and we need more psychiatric folks and psychologists on the ground in Montana. I always talk about veterans coming back with unseen injuries, and they are. It's the biggest injury that came out of Iraq. But the truth is, the general population has huge issues when it comes to mental health too. And because of the stigma that's around it, most folks won't come forward when in fact, if you can get professional help, it can be treated and it can be cured. But we also need the professionals to be able to do that. So I'm willing to work with the Board of Regents, with anybody, with the medical community, with the different chancellors to make sure that we can do everything we can do to try to get more medical professionals into this state. And I know many of you have nursing programs that are very, very good programs, and God bless you for that, because that's equally as important. Yeah.
Mr. York.
Senator Tester, it's
Yes.
good to see you
Good
again.
to see you.
My tag says Denise Juneau. I'm not Denise Juneau. However, I have the great honor of representing her today.
I picked up on that.
Thank you, sir. Once again, thank you for your educational service and what you've done for education from the days you were in the Montana legislature all the way through your tenure in Washington. A lot of the folks in higher ed don't realize what's happening at the K-12 level right now, but the Elementary and Secondary Education Act is on fast track, which has shocked all of us and is very pleasing.
Yeah.
Do you see the same possibilities for the Higher Ed Act as well as possibly the Perkins reauthorization?
Sure. I hope so. I mean, I think that you've built off of successes, and Every Child Achieves Act is in conference right now and will be out, I'm sure, before the middle of December, which I think is a step forward for K-12 education. I was thinking about coming in here and visiting with you folks. I mean, you are probably not all from the same political party, and you are probably have different perspectives on where your interests are, but the bottom line is you all work together and you try to do what's right for the university system. That's the Montana way, and we need to have more of that at the federal level. And I think when it comes to the Higher Ed Act or Perkins or Pell or whatever it might be, it's a matter of putting enough pressure on that body, those two bodies, that they do the right thing. And it's interesting how quickly people forget of what it took for them to get through school. I would never have gotten through school without my parents' help. My kids would have never gotten through school without the government's help. And that statement in itself tells you how education has changed. My generation, my parents could afford to foot the bill. When I raising my kids, we paid for a bunch of it, but we couldn't get it all. And so it takes away opportunity, and we need to convey that information all the time to the folks who represent us in Washington, D.C. and in Helena.
Regent Holman.
Mr. Senator, thank you for being here, and like everybody else, thank you for everything you do. I think it's very obvious that you're keenly attuned to Montana issues, but specifically to issues related to education.
Thanks.
If you were to go to any of the students here today, I think they would agree with you on affordability and speak very passionately about that. I want to give you some appreciation for real minutia, but your summer internship program, which I know is done from a lot of people, but yours specifically in your office, the students who come out of that, and I've known quite a few now, just loved their time there, and had a very different experience in your office than what they get or what other interns get in a lot of the other offices, whether it's representatives or senators, in the fact that they got to actually interact with you and that they got to work on important issues with you and spend time with you. So thank you for that, because it's actually really rewarding hands-on experience.
Well, thank you. And my goal for those students, because my son was one of those interns in 2005 for Bacchus, and my goal is that they need to get experience just like they were a staff member. And so we use them just like staff members. And interesting enough, yesterday I was talking to a nonprofit group that was talking about the number of kids who can't do internships in Washington, D.C. It's pretty expensive. I mean, my kid did a summer internship. It cost us $5,000 because they don't get paid anything and they got to eat and sleep. And really encourage some of those nonprofits to offer some scholarships. And I don't know if it works within the legality of Washington, D.C., but we've got to figure out a way to make it work. As long as the kid picks where they want to go, I don't see where it should be any problem, or the student, I should say. But I think it's really, really important for women and men, young women and young men, to do those internships, to get an idea of how their government works. And so I give them every opportunity to try to learn that. In fact, most of the time, I try to do it all the time. When they come in, I ask them what area is your interest in? And we try to assign them to that staff member who works in that particular area. And since we always can use staff, I use them like staff. And it's a pretty good deal for me because we don't have to pay them. Yeah, so it's good. Thank you, by the way. Thanks.
Senator Tester, once again, we want to thank you for being here. We're close to having a break here, so we'll stop it here. We sincerely appreciate you taking time from what we know is a very busy schedule to address the Board of Regents and answer our questions. And I'll end with, you mentioned the cultural event that is happening here tomorrow, not far from where we're sitting right now. And I've noticed that as you came up to the podium, I didn't see a maroon and silver tie or a blue and gold tie. So any thoughts about perhaps what's going to be happening tomorrow? Just curious about that.
Which symphony is playing tomorrow?
Very good. Thank you, Senator Tester.
Thank you.
Let us now take a 15-minute break and we'll commence where we left off. Thank you. We will now reconvene and thank our friends from Dawson Community College for allowing us to take that commercial break. Thank you very much, and thanks for your patience. We appreciate that. So I will now turn it back over to you, Chair Albrecht.
Thank you, Chair Tess, and again, thank you for allowing that opportunity for Senator Tester to speak with us. I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over to you with regard to an update on Dawson Community College, and if you would, please just provide some introductions so that everyone knows who you are. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Tuss, Chair Albrecht, Commissioner Christian, and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here. On behalf of the trustees of Dawson Community College, I'm glad to have the opportunity to share with our colleagues around the state our commitment to higher education in Dawson County and eastern Montana, and our plan for how to move forward. So we're glad to be here. As I said, Chad Knutson, I'm the current chairman of the board. I've been a trustee for just about 3 years, joined by President Vincent Nix, who I think all of you know. So my portion of this presentation today is to provide some context. I had put together a presentation for our Board of Trustees as well as our administration because many of them are new trustees and new to the administration of the college. And I wanted a succinct way to provide some context for the change that the college is going through. And based on Commissioner Christian's comment this morning about the tenure of the Regents, I think it's appropriate to be able to take the opportunity to provide that context to you all as well. We're well aware that starting this summer, we looked at budgetary restrictions that necessitated some reductions in force, which is a rather traumatic process for a small college in a small community. But the transition at Dawson started well before that and has really been on a persistent and robust trajectory for at least the last 3 years. So the slide that you see here reflects a number of data points, including our enrollment story, our administrative and governance story, as well as some of the activities, the key activities that has taken place over those years. Coming into the fall of 2012, which is where I will begin, we had a number of deficiencies which showed really a lack of systemic institutional systems at the college and poor administration, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. So we had some payroll issues, we had incomplete and inaccurate audits that had to be reopened and revisited. Due to poor reporting, we had loans that were at risk of default. We had federal student aid that was imperiled. We had unused grant money, and probably most concerning of that very concerning list, we really were not prepared for a year 7 visit from our accreditors at Northwest. And so that realization of where we had gotten resulted in the resignation of our president at the end of the fall semester of that year, and the appointment of an interim president, Jane Baker, who was with us for a semester. And over the course of the next 11 months, we had a complete transition of our administrative team right across the board. In fact, we had, within that period, 3 different presidents. And as you can see from the illustration, there have been 3 different chairmen. We are now in our 4th president since 3 years ago today. So a tremendous amount of change in the leadership at the college. In order to rectify the deficiencies on the left, a number of things had to be put in place, and it was really a matter of establishing systems and procedures. And through that, we have created an institutional effectiveness model that seems to be working. We cleaned up our audits, as I mentioned, reopened and closed audits going back a number of years. We have reconciled all of our financial entries. We have completed the visit from Northwest and had accreditation renewed this summer. We developed a new simplified strategic plan and mission. We developed student outcome assessment plans for every course being taught. And we moved toward the realization that we would have to take action with regard to the size and makeup of our faculty. And so we developed a retirement incentive plan last year. All of that brings us to where we are today, which is a point where we finally have the systems in place to function well as an institution. And that brings us to the need to look at our courses and our programs, which had not been reviewed for many years, and make decisions about how well they were serving students and serving our region. In the course of doing that, and out of financial necessity, we've announced some reductions in force and re-emphasized some of the pieces within the mix of our core themes as a comprehensive 2-year college, with a greater emphasis on the career and technical training opportunities that are needed in our area. We're putting laser focus on enrollment management, and realizing that as this difficult transition has occurred, we've been unable to stem the decline, rather precipitous decline in enrollment. And certainly we are aware as a board that if you're not offering a product that students want, you're not going to attract those students. And so we are moving rapidly to make those changes. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have, but at this point I'll turn it over to Vince to talk about our path forward.
Again, thank you, Madam Chair, Deputy Commissioner, Regents. Next, oh, you've got it, okay. So as Chairman Knudsen said, we did get our accreditation reaffirmed. We did establish a simplified mission statement for core themes. I'll talk about those core themes in relation to each other, particularly how the college transfer core theme relates to the others in a little bit more. Next, please. However, all is not rosy, as you heard. We are experiencing a financial exigency. And as I discussed with some of you in Butte at my first Regents meeting, we did pass a balanced budget that required reductions in force. As part of that process, we cut 4.5 FTE among our faculty ranks, 1.5 FTE among classified staff. We first cut an administrator, my previous position of Assistant Vice President for Instruction and Student Services, before any other cuts. That position was replaced by an Assistant Vice President of Career and Technical Education, and the money does not come from the general fund, it came from a grant. So that saved us tremendous salary. We do pay the benefits for that position, though, out of the general fund. We currently have an adjunct ratio of, well, full-time faculty ratio of 2-to-1 to adjuncts before any of the reductions in force take place. Once implemented, we'll be at about a 1-to-2 ratio, full-time faculty to adjuncts. Through the process of building up a qualified adjunct and part-time pool of faculty, we hope our ratio gets closer to 1-to-2 as we approach fall 2017, which would put us in line with national averages. We have hired an enrollment management team. We plan to hire a student development professional for specific retention duties in the spring or the summer 2016. These proposed actions will save us $170,000 next year. Next, please, Katie. Some of the questions and criticisms, rightfully so, we must be able to justify our actions in the face of heavy resistance when we are acting with integrity. So some of those criticisms have questioned the ability to balance these cuts with program quality. Despite suggestions that accuse our administration of using machete or performing a hatchet job on our faculty and staff, we're actually using an extremely precision scalpel. The first cuts were a result of program prioritization. The result of that was that our repeating coursework on a 2-year cycle was not all highly transferable. And we realized that, so we eliminated nearly all of the courses that would not transfer seamlessly to MSU Bozeman and MSU Billings. Now, that's the favorite destination of our transfer students. Nothing personal, President Engstrom, but as Deputy Commissioner Sack pointed out in his recent visit to Glendive, he can drive to Salt Lake Community College quicker than he can come to Dawson Community College. So demographics and geographics are important in this state. By the way, we enjoyed your visits and welcome you back anytime. Any of you come spend a day with us because you can't get out there and back in a day, so you should spend the night. Anyway, this process allows us to ensure that students have an understandable menu of gen ed offerings and that common course numbering quality standards are paramount in our process. And again, students are the issue. Students are the reason we're here. And so we need something to be clear to our students. Next, please, Katie. Earlier I said I would talk about transfer education in relation to the other core themes. Less than 25% of our students enroll with that intention. The next, please. I'm sorry, I might have got out of order there. Earlier I said I would talk about this. I made a mistake on that slide. It should be closer to 20% for transfer students, but I didn't notice that I had that typo until 2 days ago, and Prezi's pathing is confusing to me, so I just decided to tell you I made a typo instead of trying to fix the path and update and run that risk. So 20% of our students come to us with the intent to transfer. 35% of our students come to us seeking career and technical education degrees so they can go to work immediately. The other roughly 40% come to us having not decided. And in the past, we've not really done a good job of helping those students decide, and so they remain undecided until they take 2 years of courses. And what we're redoing in our right-sizing efforts is restructuring so that we meet all four of these, we look at all four of our core themes, not just transfer education, because until now, 100% of Dawson's resources have been geared to transfer education students. We must adjust. Next, please. We discussed the proposal in corrosion technology yesterday. We plan to have 2 to 3 level 1 certificates proposed by the next Regents meeting. Those are nearing completion in terms of curriculum development now. We're developing a bridge program for adult learners as part of our first-year experience efforts. And our final core theme fits a program maybe that would potentially establish DCC as a training hub for state employees in eastern Montana. So we're having those discussions now. Next, please. So how does this affect the budget? I know that's your main interest, but I wanted to tell you all that other good stuff too. We expect unbudgeted expenses as a result of these actions of about $167,000. We do have alternate sources of funding from unrestricted, such as oil and gas funds, and the DCC Foundation has indicated that it would support us in maybe restructuring some of our waivers and scholarships so that we can shift monies that way. I'll wrap this up by sharing something exotic. The Chinese have a saying that I learned while I was over there. 上高皇帝远. And then Chinese, in English, that translates to the mountains are high, the emperor is far away. Complacency set in at DCC for some time, as it had in many other colleges and universities across the country. However, we are gearing up for lean, agile performance. And as I said earlier, the emperors are always welcome. We will now stand for questions.
Thank you, President Nix, and thank you, Chairman Knutson, for your commitment, your involvement, and your willingness to take a hard look at some of these difficult situations that need to be addressed. Before I ask for other questions, I would just like to know where, first of all, when we're making these difficult decisions and looking at alignment, and I know you've done a great job, and I thank you for that, President Nix. It's an opportunity for innovation, and I hear that as well. And I understand you've been working very diligently with the local community, looking at workforce needs, et cetera. I have to ask the difficult question, which is what are you exploring with regard to collaboration, formally or informally, with Miles City Community College?
Thank you, Madam Chair. President Klippenstein and I we try to meet at least once a month talking about ways in which we can do that. And our boards are looking at a joint retreat coming up.
When you talk about a joint retreat, what's on your agenda? Without micromanaging, I think there's obviously some opportunities for efficiencies there.
Not to interrupt,
Please.
Madam Chair. I think that there's a recognition that economies of scale are lacking when you're talking about two schools of our size, and so anything that we can do collaboratively that improves upon that is positive. Based on some of the actions that we've been engaged in over the last couple of years, the opportunities to further those discussions with Miles City, I guess, hit the back burner. I've certainly talked with the chairman in Miles City, and he's very interested, and I'm very interested. Our boards, I believe, are both interested in exploring that. We have on our agenda for our upcoming trustees meeting this coming Monday to set that meeting or to explore that meeting. I don't believe that we have developed an agenda at this time, but we would be looking at anything that we can do together, either to save costs or to serve students better and look for revenue.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee or other members of the Regents?
Yes.
Regent Johnstone.
Thank you. Just a follow-up comment from the chair's comment. I would encourage you to look for opportunities to collaborate, share services. There's a whole range, presumably, of structural options out there, but I think in conversations that I've had with other members of the board, I think there's a common view that we need to have a very open mind and be willing to look at a range of options to address the economies of scale issue that I think both you and Miles City probably have. So thank you for doing that.
Regent Nystuen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Knudsen and President Nix, I think one of the struggles with the Board of Regents and the Commissioner's Office, and maybe it's me or whatever, but is the understanding of the Board of Regents' role and Commissioner's role with regards to community colleges. I think it's pretty well defined that the locally elected trustees manage and control this group here coordinates and supervises. And so I guess what I'd be interested in knowing is what would you wish of us, Commissioner Christian's office, the Board of Regents, and your colleagues around the table to help you shoulder the responsibilities of providing more stability at Dawson and ultimately moving the organization forward. We know practically that there isn't an endless supply of dollars and so forth, but I mean, what can we do to help the cause?
Well, I think certainly from my perspective, the board has been supportive, and the office, the Commissioner's office has been extraordinarily supportive. I understand that they, work behind the scenes with our administration a lot to provide whatever help they can. From my perspective on the governance board, the biggest issue that I see in the state of Montana is the university system as the 800-pound gorilla and 3 community colleges outside the fence, and that creates a number of interesting dynamics when it's time to go to the legislature and it's time to talk budgets and funding. And so where the university system is able to put together a comprehensive plan that gets a lot of attention and can capture the imagination of the public and the legislature, we're sometimes at the tail end waiting to find out what happens. So I think to the extent that we have support from the regents and from the commissioner in that regard, that's very helpful to us politically.
And I want to echo that support. I feel support already from the Commissioner's office and particularly Deputy Commissioner Seck. As somebody said about Senator Tester earlier, he answers his phone. I think I'm on John's speed dial for texts too, because he answers my text every time, any time of the day. And that's critical support as we navigate these rough seas, pardon the pun.
If I may comment briefly on Regent Johnstone's comment and Chair Albrecht's comment about collaboration, one of the things I want to point out is that the way we are structured, we have no middle management. All of our employees are supervised by one of our 4 president or vice presidents. And so the ability to change how you manage a system is somewhat limited, and so some of the collaboration that may be envisioned at the administrative level is not feasible the way we're structured. There are no department heads. There's no middle level of management at all. So I think that's important to point out in the discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you. Regent Sheehy.
With respect to your last comment, I think you need to really think about different means of collaborating. I mean, I think you got to put on your innovative hat. I don't know if it's a bus, I don't know what it is, but I think the message you're getting here today, and I don't mean to be flip, but the plains are flat and Miles City's community college is close. And I think you need to collaborate with them in some way from our overview standpoint.
Any other questions or comments from the regents? Regent Nystuen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe this isn't in the context of totally righting the ship, but we know, Vincent, you are interim president, and I've appreciated the energy that you've brought to the college and to this group here. It's so noted that it's not easy. I'm sure there are sleepless nights and tough conversations in Dawson County and the city of Glendive and so forth. But any thoughts as to where you and the board are going with naming a full-time president after this interim period with you, Vincent?
Well, my mantra to the board and to everybody, including Vince, has been stability, stability, stability. That if you look at our administrative team right now, all of them were hired in some capacity by President Simon. That's by design. That provides continuity going back to the robust presidential search process that took place in 2013. It provides a context and awareness of the course that we're on. I think that the board intends to certainly negotiate with President Nix to keep him around as long as we can. And so that's very, very top of our agenda. In fact, I think it's on our agenda for Monday night. So I appreciate that comment and the importance of that.
Thank you for the kind words.
Chair Tuss. President Klippenstein.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I would like to be able to share just a few points in regards of support of President Nix as well as Chair Knudsen. Miles Community College and Dawson Community College has, over the last couple years, communicated quite a bit. So when Mike Simon was the president, we would have joint meetings and pull in our vice presidents for administration to talk about some efficiencies and purchasing power and so forth. So we have taken that on over the last couple years with President Simon leaving and interim President Nix coming in. We've continued on some of that dialogue. We've also had a lot of joint dialogue about serving Eastern Montana in a broader sense, and how do we team up where we can use some of our expertise at Dawson, some of our expertise at Miles, and how can we provide maybe a better outreach to some of our local communities. So that's always a continued dialogue and will continue to be a dialogue. We will continue to work with Dawson and very much supportive, because Eastern Montana, we're only as strong as really our two community colleges can provide. And so we want to do everything we can to support them. Taking a look at some longer range type items and initiatives, our board spent a lot of time at a retreat this last summer in discussion of a letter that we received from Commissioner Christian, and as well as a communication with Chair Knudsen. And so our board is still very aware of the thoughts and the feelings, and they do want to, as much as possible, work with their local board, understanding that the two community colleges are from two different counties, funded from those counties a little bit differently, and those counties have expectations of the community colleges, as well as the boards have expectations of their individual presidents and administration to serve those communities. So we want to make sure that, so we have 14 trustees that recognize that, and we'll continue to work together and step together as much as possible. So thank you.
Thank you, President Klippenstein, and thank you for your support in this process. That's absolutely critical as you move forward. And I certainly understand that this kind of engagement, especially from a community college level, you really need that engagement of the community and that buy-in. And so when you lead by engaging those folks who you need on your team to move it all forward, to ensure that it's effective. But again, I just am very excited about the opportunity for innovation, given that these difficult decisions need to be made, while pairing that concurrently with the potential for innovation and even better serving those communities and our Eastern Montana contingents. Regent Nystuen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this isn't in the context of providing you cover or anything like that, but from my vantage point, I think that the students in Eastern Montana, and I lived in Miles City from 1990 to 96 and was good friends with all of my friends up at MCC and so forth, but I think students in Eastern Montana have got a unique opportunity that maybe other students around the rest of the state don't have, and that is your neighbor immediately to your east. North Dakota provides, I think, some pretty attractive packages for students in all over Montana to come to their universities in Dickinson, Williston, and beyond to enroll there. Could you describe the type of headwinds you have as students in eastern Montana have a choice? You know, they can go into the workforce, make a lot of dollars in the oil field or the support industries. They can go to North Dakota to attain some type of educational degree, or they can come to Dawson and potentially Miles. How big of an issue is that? And could you describe that for us, please?
Yes, thanks for the question, Regent. Nice to. That is a big issue. As you've probably all heard, there's a Bakken University starting in North Dakota now, and it's looking at fields just as you described. That's one of the reasons that we jumped on the corrosion engineering technology program. That is industry, not industry specific. It crosses so many industries, the Department of Defense, Department of Transportation, energy, you name it. Everybody deals with corrosion. And so and there's not another program around. And so we're looking at developing other programs like that don't compete with Miles City, that don't compete with the schools in North Dakota. And one of the things that our research is showing us is that North Dakota has exploration wrapped up. And so our programs will look at development and transportation as the energy industry matures and develops. That is what our strategic program development will look at, fitting the niche.
Any other questions? I again want to thank you both, and your presentation was very helpful. And I certainly hope that when we see those lines, that timeline continue, that we will see the innovation and we will see the rollout that will show the improvement and again the continued success of the area. So again, thank you both for your leadership, for your engagement and your commitment. At this point, I'd turn it back over to Deputy Commissioner Robinson for the next item on the information agenda.
Chair Albrecht, members of the board, the next three items on the information agenda are significant future construction projects that will be coming your way for action in future board meetings. And I always like to provide a little bit of heads up as they look to move forward. So the item regarding Matthews Hall renovation, bathroom remodel at Western, I've asked Chancellor Weatherby to provide a little overview of that particular project.
Chair Albrecht, members of the board, this is not a glamorous project. But it's very, very important to our students. Vice Chancellor Briggs could not be here today because of a very happy family event, but she asked me to provide some information. We're talking about Matthews Hall, which is our second oldest building on campus after Main Hall. It was built in 1920, and some of the restrooms were remodeled before I was born in the early 50s, and some were remodeled in the 70s, and some are actually original. And I took Royce actually on a tour of these, and Tyler, and you can testify to the fact, I think, that they look better in the photographs in your packet than they do in person. But they are still functional, which is a testimony to our great facilities and management folks and the fact that we really stretch a dollar at Western. So we're looking at safety issues, some ADA issues, as well as some privacy issues. And we've had a cost and feasibility study. It looks like it will cost about $1 million to remodel these restrooms, about $300,000 of auxiliary funds we're hoping, and some debt financing, and we're looking into that with Missoula to make those funds possible. I'm trying to think if I've left anything out, but it's just a project whose time has come and we're excited about getting it underway. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Thank you, Chancellor Weatherby, and again,
welcome.
congratulations on so much of the progress that you've had with University of Montana Western. It's exciting to see where you are leading the ship.
Thank you. I would just add one thing, and it is that this project is extremely important because of that success. We are almost at capacity for residents, for residential students coming in, and so we want to provide them with a really great experience and some alternatives. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, this is an information item, so it will return to us in the future. Deputy Commissioner Robinson.
Chair Albrecht, the next item dealing with Missoula campus and the associated students in terms of purchasing buses for their student transportation program. And Vice President Mike Reed will be speaking to the proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'd also like to introduce Jordan Hess. He's the Director of ASUM Transportation, and he's joining me today to help answer questions if you have any. By way of introduction, the Associated Students of the University of Montana through the Office of Transportation are anticipating the purchase of 2 electric buses to replace 2 older diesel buses in their existing fleet. Transitioning to electrical buses will reduce operating costs, reduce fleet emissions, and help alleviate noise pollution. Although the electric buses have a higher upfront cost, the long-term cost of ownership is estimated to be approximately $89,000 less than the conventional diesel bus. That's based on a 15-year life cycle. To fund this project, the university will need to finance a little more than $1.6 million of a $2 million project. Debt repayment of approximately $162,200 annually will be through revenue available through the Small Transit Intensive Cities Funding and the ASUM transportation fee. The ASUM transportation fee was recently approved for an increase in both 2006 and 2017. The total cost of the fee in 2017 will be $38 per full-time student. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and either myself or Jordan Hess would be happy to provide any other additional information.
Thank you. If I may, I thank you for both, and thank you, Jordan, Mr. Hess, for being here. It's my understanding with some other university systems that they collaborate with the local bus transit system. And I know that you are all uniquely involved in Missoula in your other role. And I would like to know, first of all, when we look at an upfront cost again, I completely agree with an electric bus. That makes sense from the cost perspective. However, I'm wondering the reality of whether we should be running our own system within the University of Montana, and if we can look at Mountain Line in Missoula and the potential of having the city program run that, since we're already paying into that, there might be some opportunities there for us to save money and for a more efficient service. Could you speak to that, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Albrecht and members of the committee. I guess if I may, I'll give a little background on our collaboration and what efforts we have going forward, and then more directly answer your question. In 2014, ASUM and the university, the city of Missoula, and the Mountain Line Transit Agency entered a initiated a collaborative study with consultant firm Nelson Nygaard. And we're looking at a number of factors there. The transit component has largely wrapped up, and we've implemented several of the recommendations from that study. And I guess the best I can say on that is that transit collaboration is truly better than it ever has been between Mountain Line and ASUM Transportation. We've done some joint route planning, joint marketing. And we actually just submitted our first joint grant application for federal funds for bus purchase in 2017. I guess my perspective from the complexity of the system is that a merger or any kind of joining so that there's a single system is probably a longer term, maybe a 5 to 10 year horizon. And I think at this point, due to the operating costs of the ASUM system versus the Mountain Line system, I think that UM or ASUM would frankly, it would cost ASUM or UM a significant amount of money to divest itself of the ASUM transportation transit system, just because of our lower operating costs. To put a little perspective on that, the operating expenses per vehicle revenue hour, which is a pretty standard metric in the Federal Transit Administration lingo, for Mountain Line is $85.57 per hour. For the ASUM service, it's $51.67 an hour. So we would any operational efficiencies that would be gained would be offset by that pretty significant difference in operating costs. And that is largely due to the fact that we have student operators, a pretty light organization overall as far as overhead costs.
Regent Nystuen.
Regent Nystuen. We've got Regent Johnstone as well. So whoever would like to go first.
No, I'll yield to you. Okay, well, maybe this is a question you were going to ask. So, in all seriousness, yesterday we heard from President Engstrom talking about 200 positions being cut at the University of Montana, the belt tightening that will need to occur throughout the entire university and beyond. How, Mr. President, are you putting a $2 million really cool looking bus system into the equation to purchase that at a time when we're talking jobs and programs and students and so forth? It's an interesting dilemma in my mind to consider both of these at the same meeting.
Regent Nystuen, Madam Chair, members of the board. It certainly is an interesting combination. I don't deny that, Regent Nystuen. I think that, for one thing, these are very different pools of money that we're talking about. On the one hand, we're talking about general fund dollars in the adjustments that we're making, and the dollars going to ASUM transportation are a different source altogether. The fact is, we do have major transportation needs at the University of Montana, and how do we meet those most effectively? So this extensive study that Jordan and the university have engaged in do point out that we're able to provide those transportation needs, those necessary needs, at a cost factor that is significantly less than if we were to outsource this to Mountain Line. This is not the first time we've asked that particular question. We've asked that particular question on multiple occasions, and to provide the transportation needs that the university needs, we are doing that more cost effectively through ASUM transportation than if we went the other route. So I mean, that is a demonstrable fact. And to continue providing that transportation and in that most cost-effective way requires the upgrading of equipment on occasion. This is over the long term, a cost-saving exercise, as Mr. Reed pointed out. So it is an upfront cost. It's coming from a source that doesn't overlap with the general fund that we talked about yesterday. And in the end, it is a cost-saving measure for us, and it is a community engagement measure as well. We have had considerable discussion with our community about transportation, noise and pollution of buses and things like that, and this is a mechanism to address that community concern as well, and doing it in what we have determined to be a cost-effective way. So I agree with you that in the urgent sense, it is an outlay of money, but the financial plan for doing that is actually a cost savings. And so it is a measure that is, I think, fiscally responsible. Thank you.
Regent Johnstone.
Yield to Regent Holman. I think he wanted to offer some additional
Regent
context.
Holman.
Well, I actually have a few questions. Are you sure you want to yield to me just at the moment?
I'm very sure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Regent. Madam Chair. Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I have, I think, 3 or 4 questions.
Please, go ahead.
First of all, just for the board's notice, I mean, if this comes to a vote for us, I'll probably abstain because it was a significant project that I was a part of last year and invested in. That being said, I do have a few questions. Jordan, it's my understanding that a number of student governments who do collaborate with city transportations, frequently just turn over the money that the students are paying into the transportation fee to the student government. Can you speak to that at all?
Sure. Thank you, Regent Homan. It's nice to work with you in this capacity as well. There are several examples. That is the most typical model of a community operating a transportation system with a student fee or some financial assistance from a university contributing to that. The most typical is sort of a UPass type system where the fares are subsidized for students, faculty, and staff at the university. Our situation is quite unique. There are several examples that I'm aware of mid-sized cities with dual transit systems. Athens, Georgia is a good example of a university system and a community system. There's other peer institutions that, or similarly sized cities that have a similar structure. There's others that have gone a different route. University of Kansas just combined a university system and a community system, and that came with a unique set of circumstances as well. One of the things that would concern me is that right now we have a really positive structure of student governance, and it truly is workforce development. We have students who are alums of our program and former student employees who have gone on to work as transit professionals around the country, in the Bay Area, in Seattle and Portland. And the members of our board of directors gain such an in-depth experience, and our transit operators, our student drivers, again, gain such an in-depth experience that it really goes on to serve them well. So that student, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Excuse me. I am wondering if you can speak also to if there's any kind of long-term savings having, so when we discussed this, and I don't remember the numbers, which is why I'm asking, there was long-term savings that President Engstrom just alluded to running electric versus diesel buses.
Yeah, so Regent Homan and Chair Albrecht, we're looking at about $89,000 per bus over the life of the vehicles. So that's a 15-year life, and I think that's a pretty conservative number.
And this is the last question. I actually would like to call on ASUM President, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Okay. Cody, if you wouldn't mind joining us. As you all know, and I don't think it's a secret, there's enrollment issues on campus. And I know that Cody's spoken to me in the past about being innovative in the way we draw students to campus, and he wanted to say something about that.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Regent Homan, thank you for considering this and for having this discussion now. I do think in light of UM's enrollment issues, it's important to keep in mind the types of services that we offer at UM that can bring students to the University of Montana and to the Montana University system. I've said many times how unique our services are, and especially ASUM transportation. It's one of the few really student-run, student-funded transit systems in the country. And being unique in and of itself, it will be even more so if we can purchase electric buses, because like I've said before, we'll be one of even fewer universities in the country that will have electric buses, completely student-funded and student-run in this type of environment. And I think those types of innovative services and new ideas and new technologies are really a great thing to bring students from all around the country to the University of Montana. And I really can't stress how important that would be to ASUM and to UM to try to bring in some of those students that are interested in sustainability technology and these types of innovative new technologies. So I hope that was sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meixner. Regent Johnstone.
Yes, thank you, Chair Albrecht. I just had one question. Many of them were answered. Assuming that you proceed to purchase these two buses, and assuming that down the road you actually decided that maybe it was a good idea to combine with the city system, would the purchase of these buses in any way impair or negatively affect your ability to do that combination?
Regent Johnstone, I don't believe it would. Our system, as long as it operates, we'll have to have serviceable equipment, and as you know, that's a challenge. That has been a challenge for us historically, and I'm sure that there's a mechanism where we could effectively combine down the road if that we're the best path.
Thank you.
Commissioner Christian.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I think Regent Nice-Tune, somewhat to your question, I don't want to turn this into a budget conversation, but I want to be a little bit careful that we don't create sort of a false cloud. What I believe is happening at the university is an effort to right-size, and I've used that word before, the current staff to the current enrollment. But I think we have to make no mistake, there's 13,000 high-quality students there that need the world-class service that we promised them, and that I know we can provide them, and I'm certain that the University of Montana is committed to doing. I don't want that right-sizing effort to sort of damper the progressive spirit that exists on that campus to provide the services they need to the existing students and to create services such as was announced in the rest of President Engstrom's comments on Tuesday about where that campus goes and forward-looking to new programs and new services. And, you know, we've got to stay on track. There's no doubt that those are some difficult decisions, but it's a right-sizing effort, and I want to make certain that we don't sort of create a spiral in our own rhetoric that there's something wrong. There's nothing wrong. It needs to have a budget and a staff that represents the students that are there, and I think that's an important message in that. But the future is bright, and they need to look for that future and make sure that we're progressively serving the high-quality students that we have.
Mm-hmm. Regent Nice-Tune.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner and Madam Chair. I phrase that question in the spirit of there's a lot of people in Missoula and beyond that are going to be asking that of themselves and around the dinner table and so forth, that they're a community, and President Engstrom answered the question to my satisfaction. I'm supportive of it, but there's a lot of people saying buses, jobs, community. How's this university proceeding in this effort? So, never for a minute would I ever want to diminish the ultimate value that institution brings to our state here, but in the real world, the practical world, people are going to be asking those questions, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, and I think that in order to be prudent, as in our role as the Board of Regents, that these are the discussions that we need to be having. So thank you for the questions and the inquiry. Thank you for your work, and again, as an information item, this is an opportunity for us to express to you our concerns and our thoughts on this. So thank you for your work, and we look forward to seeing what this study will also produce so that we can understand what sort of shared services and efficiencies that can be created to provide an even better system overall. So thank you both for your work. With no further questions, I will turn it back over to Deputy Commissioner Robinson. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Chair Albrecht, the next item I've asked Chancellor Blackader to provide a little overview. This particular residence hall learning center, living learning center, has been in the planning stages for 4 or 5 more years. And so getting close to perhaps having it completed in terms of fundraising and bringing it forward to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Madam Chair, members of the board, I was going to use this opportunity to introduce our ASMT officers, but I think Carrie Lombard and Jamie Nelson have left. Our Frontier Conference Symphony is playing tomorrow and in a playoff game. And so I think they've returned back to Butte for that concert. As Mr. Robinson stated, this is a project that started 4 or 5 years ago, perhaps even before I got there. Our need for student housing, we currently have about 283 beds on campus. We've done a bathroom remodel as well in the last year that was about $1 million, so that's a great thing to do for the students. You know, this project in total, just as a broad summary, is about a $30 to $35 million project related to how that is funded. Our plan is to look at $15 million worth of bonding for the living portion of the Living and Learning Center, and then about $20 million in philanthropic support that would be probably more than likely phased. A second phase that would follow, and that would be supported by gifts. We've already made a number of announcements just in recent weeks, and we expect to have a few more significant gifts that will help us towards that. But this is really just to let you know what's going on with that process there and keep you informed as we get very serious about trying to start the project. So with that, I'd like to have my facilities director, Michael Allen, give you a brief update on that project. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Blackcutter, Madam Chair, members of the board. As was mentioned, this project has been going on for a while. In the May 2011 board meeting, you granted authorization to do design work on a new residential hall on the Montana Tech campus. In the meantime, a lot of things have changed. Student enrollment has grown. Types of residential hall things have, in the marketplace have changed. We did do some major renovation in our traditional oldest dormitory or residential hall. And we have done a lot of study with various different groups and constituents about what type of facility is best going to serve Tech for the next 20, 30, 40 years and beyond. Recently, this past year, Montana Tech Foundation hired a consultant, a national residential hall consultant, student life consultant, Brailsford and Dunleavy. You have an attachment that was an executive summary of that study. Essentially, what we're talking about is how many types of beds we can have and what type of mix we would be looking at in a new living component of that facility. We would combine this with what's known as a learning aspect, another phase of the project, where you have intelligent and smart instructional spaces, academic spaces, collaborative learning and teaching spaces. The rest of the project beyond would be perhaps food service component and other types of student recreational aspects that are available. At that board meeting, since authorization was granted for the design, TAC worked with State Architecture and Engineering Services and selected Oz Architects from Missoula as the design architect of record. They have done some preliminary work, and we are now ready to go and engage them in a much more in-depth programming aspect for this project. As Brailsford and Dunleavy's study has suggested as the next step, we're going to engage Oz again with campus groups, community groups, and do a lot more intensive programming so that we get the correct learning component with the living component. We are working with Missoula for bonding on the living component, the residential component, and we have verified with State Architecture and Engineering that Oz is the architect of record. I am available for questions.
Any questions from the Regents? I would just like to note that, again, as you've had some, it's exciting, and congratulations on your continued success with enrollment and the programs, the outstanding nationally known programs that you're providing at Montana Tech. This certainly seems to continue to meet that need, and so I congratulate and thank you for your work on this. And of course, the other game that's tomorrow is not just the Cat Grizz, it's the Frontier Conference champions going on into playoffs, so congratulations.
Thank you very
Montana
much.
Tech. With that, I would turn it back to Deputy Commissioner Robinson.
Chair Albrecht, the last grouping on the information agenda are the audit reports that have been received by our office this fall, and the fall is a time when most of the fiscal year-end audit reports show up. So we've listed those. Frida Hauser of our office, the Director of Accounting and Budgeting, does a review of all of the audits that we do receive. We have really nothing in these individual audits to bring to your attention. You'll notice that for the financial audits, they are all clean opinions, unmodified opinions. We do have a couple of compliance audits for Montana State University and the University of Montana presented at the end and there were recommendations connected with those audits. Those were discussed in front of the Legislative Audit Committee, and those campuses are taking action or have already taken action to address those recommendations and respond back to the Legislative Audit Committee. So unless there are particular questions regarding any of those audits, I will not further comment on those.
Regent Johnstone.
Yes, Chair Albrecht, thank you. Could we have a little bit of a flavor of the conversation at the Legislative Audit Committee relative to the 2 compliance audits?
Chair Albrecht and Regent Johnstone, I'm going to ask Frida Hauser, who was present at that Audit Committee meeting, to provide a little overview and discussion. And I think the vice presidents from Bozeman and Missoula could also provide their insight into that discussion.
I don't need a lengthy explanation, but just a little flavor. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, for the record, Frida Hauser, Director of Accounting and Budgeting. I did attend the Legislative Audit Committee meeting, and it was very positive. There were 12 recommendations for MSU. There were 4 for U of M, and they were discussed. A lot of the questions were not on the audit report, but it was a very positive discussion, and the campuses are taking it seriously and implementing procedures to implement those recommendations.
President Engstrom.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, Regent Johnstone, I'll just say the 2 areas of audit, of recommendations in our audit, one had to do with research compliance and the purchase of a piece of equipment without the official permission of the granting agency. The granting agency did give us permission post facto. And the other had to do with exit interviews with students who were leaving the university who had loans, and so you're required to do an exit interview, and some of those students get away from you without knowing it, and that was the topic of that particular, of the set of recommendations we had. And I think the Legislative Audit Committee was perfectly satisfied with the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, President Engstrom. Any further questions from members of the board? I read through those, and there were no major red flags that were of concern to me with the responses. Regent Nystuen.
Just a quick comment that I think these days getting unqualified clean opinions is pretty amazing, at least from my day job. That's a tall order. I know that a lot of the work goes in behind the scenes, and the support staff is incredibly valuable to help attain those levels here. So there's unfortunately only one way to go is, well, to sustain it or go down. So I just like to acknowledge across the system here that's an impressive list of unqualified clean opinions. So thank you.
Excellent point. Regent Johnstone.
In connection with the audits, do we get management letters or any comments from the, typically in an audit, you'd get a comment back to the governing body with respect to recommendations from the auditors or comments from the auditors? Do you receive those or not?
Board of Regents, the Legislative Audit Division has implemented a new procedure where the Board of Regents are now copied on all management letters. So in the past, you may not have seen those letters, but going forward, the board will be copied. And the letters are sent directly from the Legislative Audit Division to addresses that they can find for board members. So you will be seeing those.
This is perhaps a confession on my part that I don't open all my mail, but have any been sent?
Yes. You know? Yes. There have been 2 sent that I'm aware of related to the MSU compliance audit and the U of M compliance audit.
Okay, I did see those, but none with respect to the financial audits.
No, those are in progress right now. And normally, those will not have as many recommendations as the compliance audits. So you probably won't see issues related to the financial statements. Normally, the compliance audit is where we have the technical issues.
Understood, but if there are letters in the future, they will be sent to us.
It's my understanding legislative audit has implemented that to do that, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I received mine. Any further questions or comments? Okay, well, with that, I will adjourn this committee meeting, and certainly later on we will take public comment. I'll turn this back over to Chair Tuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Albrecht. Good committee meeting. On the agenda, we took care of the executive session item yesterday. And so we're now at that point of committee action. So what we will do is go through the 4 committees, three of whom have action items that we'll have to consider right now. And we will begin with the ARSA committee. We have the consent agenda for the ARSA committee. There are 3 items. One is the Level 2 memorandum. One is the revision to Board Policy 401, Research and Technology Transfer. And the third one is revision to Board Policy 404, Facilities and Administrative Rate. Is there a motion to approve this consent agenda?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there additional comments or questions from the board, from the campuses, or the public on this item? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. The motion passes. The one action item we have on the ARSA committee agenda we've taken care of, which is the Regents professor nomination, and we did that yesterday. So let's proceed. We had no action items on the 2-year Education and Community College Committee agenda. So let us proceed to the Staff and Compensation Committee, where, as we discussed previously, there are a number of consent items under both labor agreements and staff items, and one emeriti faculty item. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
It's been moved by Regent Albrecht. Is there a further comment or conversation or questions from the board, from the campuses, or the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. The motion passes. Let us now proceed to the Budget Committee. And we do have the consent items that we just went through this morning, consent items A through J. Is there a motion to approve? It's been moved by Regent Nystuen. Is there further comments, questions from the board, from the campuses, or the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion passes. We will now move to action item A, authorization to upgrade building automation controls in the Lawmason Center, Missoula. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Regent Johnstone to approve item A. Is there further board, campus, or public comment on this item? Regent Nystuen.
If this is an item where potentially I may have a conflict, or my organization, I probably would abstain from voting on any type of financing related or this type of a thing. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Are you going to abstain? Is that what you indicated? Okay. Thank you, Regent Nystuen. Is there additional comments from the board, the campuses, or the public on this item? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Are there any abstentions? There's one abstention. Action item B, authorization to complete basement space in the Adams Center, Missoula. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Regent Sheehy. Is there any further comments or questions from the board, from the campuses, or the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Action item C, authorization to lease property to the Monte Cato Fire District, Missoula. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Regent Albrecht. Is there further comments or questions from the board, from the campuses, or the public? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Action item D, authorization to design and construct a new dining hall, MSU Bozeman. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Regent Sheehy. Is there further comment or questions from the board?
Chair Tuss, I will recuse myself on this. We may be engaged in this project, we're not, but the potential, I think, rises to the level of I recuse myself.
Thank you, Regent Johnstone.
Same for me, thank you.
Okay. Additional comments or questions from members of the board, from the public or from the campuses? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And there are 2 abstentions. Thank you. And with that, we are now at the time on the agenda where there is one employee appeal. And you have each received, each one of you on the board, you have each received the commissioner's decision and the written appeal with supporting documents submitted by the employee. The issue before the board in this particular case is solely to determine whether to hear the appeal at a later meeting. Board of Regent policy does not require the board to entertain these appeals if we are satisfied with the commissioner's review and decision. This appeal is confidential, so we will not be addressing the employee by name or even identifying the campus involved, nor will we address the facts or the specific issues today. The sole issue today is whether any regent believes the issues addressed in the commissioner's decision needs further review at the board level. If you do not wish to hear the appeal at the Board of Regent level, it is not necessary to make a motion. A lack of action on our part will signify our decision not to hear the case. Are there any general questions as to this procedure before we go to the appeal? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to hear this appeal. Is there a motion to hear this appeal? Is there a motion to hear this appeal? Seeing none, there being no motion to hear this appeal, the request that we entertain this appeal is denied. The commissioner's decision is upheld. Now it is time for, now it is time for public comment. Please come up to the lectern and identify yourself. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Board of Regents. My name is Marco Farrow. I'm with MEMFT. I'm here to, at the request of our bargaining units at Dawson Community College, to add some things to the presentation that was given today for your information. As we reviewed the presentation, we thought there were a few things that we would like to share with you as well. And those are some ongoing labor issues that we think you should be aware of because they're going to be key to being able to implement the plan to deal with the issues at Dawson. We have 2 units at Dawson. We have the faculty unit there and the classified unit. We currently have, and I do have this in written form, and I will share it with you, and I will share it with the folks from Dawson. I'll give it to Ms. D'Amato, and she can get it to you. But I just thought I'd highlight a few things off this report, and I encourage you to read it because it includes not only the labor issues outstanding, but some other things that you might be interested in. We have currently 2 unfair labor practices moving forward for our faculty unit there. The first one has already been certified. Investigators said it has good cause, and it has been scheduled. It's on the restructuring plan, the RIF plan. Our contention is the RIF procedure in the contract is not being followed. That will go to the Board of Personnel Appeals. We have a two-day RIF arbitration scheduled in January. And that'll be heard then. We believe that if DCC successfully cuts down to 12, that'll be about $650,000 for faculty salaries. That's less than half of DCC's current expenditure just this last year. We see that as an issue. There are other issues in play here for the faculty unit, but I want to also talk about some issues for the classified unit. We have a couple of grievance arbitrations moving forward on the RIF policy. Bottom line is we have a RIF policy in place in both contracts, and we believe that that RIF policy is not being followed. Unfortunately, this is our obligation to our members to bring these forward, and unfortunately they take a lot of time. We do believe that there's an existing budget, the budget you passed, and within that existing budget we believe we can solve these problems without these RIFs. It's our unit's contention that we can sit down and talk about this, but we're not having much success. We feel like it's important that you know, as a board, a governing board, what's going on there, because we do have the same issue that you have about quality of instruction. I mean, we do believe that full-time faculty is important to the ongoing quality of instruction, and we think going down to 12 full-time faculty is going to affect that. We have some questions in our mind whether or not there's a significant number of people in the area that qualify as adjuncts. I mean, just anecdotally, you've made a big push to find adjuncts to do dual credit in the larger cities in Montana, and we're having troubles with that. So we know that that's got to be a problem, and so we're concerned about that. And I think you should be concerned, as I mentioned last time, about how that relates to quality as those courses are offered for Common Course numbering and as they move through the system. So I will share this with you. I encourage you to read it. I'll give this to Ms. D'Amato. And would you please share copies with the folks from Dawson? We appreciate the difficult decisions that have to be made there, but we also do believe that this is why in quiet times we bargain policy, that we do so in non-crisis times so that we can follow that policy in crisis times. And I think you have that policy in place. You have a willing unit that's invested in the organization, in the campus, that wants to work with the administration and the board in Glendive, and we would hope that those conversations would take place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrow. Is there additional public comment?
Regent President Tuss, may I speak from my seat?
Where are we at? I'm sorry.
Over here. Chancellor
Please. Chancellor Knapp.
Thank you. I'd like to just take 2 minutes to celebrate and acknowledge the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Higher Education Act in 1965. It's 50 years ago this month that President Lyndon Johnson signed that bill at what is now Texas State University. And it's really impacted all of our institutions, and more importantly impacted a great number of our Montana students that have moved through our institutions. President Johnson attended Southwest Texas State Normal School, a teacher's college, back in the 1920s from 26 to 1930. And he's very much like many of the students on my campus today. He worked 3 to 5 jobs every year, all the time, going to school. He even took 9 months off because he didn't have the money to go to school and taught at what was then called a Mexican school about 90 miles southwest of San Marcos. It was at that time that these ideas of many people just didn't have the opportunity to go to college really started to formulate with him. And then as he became president, there was a task force that was run by John Gardner, a Republican, that served on his staff, that put together the basic ideas of what became the Higher Education Act. And that act is where the foundation of the Pell Grants and federal support, financial support for our students came from. It's also where the beginnings of our TRIO programs, which are so successful in supporting our undergraduate students, not just financially, but in support for their education, in putting together tutoring programs and other support programs. And it was really out of his early years at schools like MSU Northern, U of M Western, MSU Billings, that these ideas of fairness in education came about. So I think it is important for us to take just a little bit of time and acknowledge the 50th anniversary of something that has so much changed the nature of higher education in this country, and in particular, the state of Montana, and has been so important to the lives of so many of our students. Thank you.
Thank you for that celebratory note, Chancellor Nook. That is important. Thank you very much. Is there additional public comment at this point? Is there additional? Please.
Hi, I am the Vice President of the Associated Students of the University of Montana, and I'd just like to speak a little bit more about the student electric buses and financing for that. So there are a lot of questions about the differences between right-sizing the university and what we're doing with the electric buses. So I'd just like to clarify a little bit of our fee structure. So the fee money for ASUM transportation is directly from the students and for the students, and it's not part of the general fund of the university at all. Also, our main mission is to serve the student body as a student government, and the best way that we can do that is for providing transportation, as parking is a really big problem on our campus, and the best way to alleviate that is through public transportation, and it's a really popular service among our students, and we have incredibly high ridership on our buses, so it's a really crucial, important service for our students. And I'd just like to introduce our Board of Transportation. This is Mary O'Malley, and she's an ASUM senator.
So thank you, members of the board and Vice President Story, for letting me speak. I wanted to speak. I'm Mary O'Malley. I'm an ASUM senator, and I'm also chair of ASUM Board of Transportation. And I wanted to speak today because I'm not sure that I'll be able to make it to the next meeting. So this might be a little bit of a reiteration, but I wanted to provide kind of a student voice in the students that work on these issues. So ASUM Office of Transportation, ASUM OT, I'm probably going to use these things, so I'll say it now. ASUM OT provides a wide variety of services, and we're speaking specifically about the UDASH service, which is our bus service, because there are other things that ASUM OT and the board oversee. And our UDASH service provides, yes, there's rides, but there's also safe rides from downtown. It also helps alleviate the parking issues on campus, and it's also better for our environment, so it fits with our sustainability goals, both as ASUM and as the University of Montana. So some of the other services outside of the actual services, we provide jobs for students. Our drivers are some of the highest paid students on campus. They're also some of the highest trained. The training they go through allows them to leave the University of Montana and find jobs pretty much anywhere in the country driving buses. And so an InstaJob, once you come out of college, is a pretty cool thing. We also provide a great opportunity for the board. I'm one of 7 students that serve on the Board of Transportation, and 2 of our students are city planning, one with a specialization in transportation, and so this is an invaluable experience to sit on a board overseeing a relatively large transportation operation. We also have a really wonderful relationship with Mountain Line, and I kind of wanted to address that. We are working very much in partnership. The survey and the study that is being conducted is both us and Mountain Line working together, because we're working on a very cohesive plan to provide transportation service to Missoula, and specifically on our end, the students and faculty and staff of the University of Montana. So this is a shared vision for the University of Montana, and in the past it has worked because our main priority is the students, faculty, and staff. So when we plan our routes and when we plan the services we provide, it benefits them. And then when we do it really successfully, Mountain Line sometimes steps up and takes those routes and allows us to expand into different routes and different services. So it's a really great relationship that we have now. And also on the topic of electric buses, how this kind of benefits everyone and everything is the students that work with us get the opportunity to drive and work in a system that uses electric buses, which are going to become more and more prevalent. It's better for our community environment because they're more quiet, which can be kind of a concern for our late night rides. And it also fits in with the sustainability goals of both ASUM and the University of Montana. And most importantly for us, it fits in with the needs and desires of our students. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for those comments. Is there additional public comment? Is there additional public comment?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Rick Hayes from Helena, and I'm here today thanks to the invitation of President Cruzado, who invited all of us President Advisory Council members to partake in this session kind of around her meeting, which started last night, and then we'll get rolling as soon as you're finished here. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you all for having this meeting here today in conjunction with our meeting. Works out very well. It's been very informative. I regret that I don't take advantage of these more often. I know you come to Helena, you live in Helena, some of you, but you do an annual deal at Helena, try and participate there, because I have the good fortune of being involved with Daniel Bingham's institution there when opportunity presents. Which, by the way, I think makes me kind of part of Switzerland, because then I'm kind of on both camps. So, but no, I just think these kinds of public forums and discussion are what we need more of, to see the work that's being done, the due diligence that you put in, the candidly, the minutiae that you get into, which in some parts kind of pains me, because I think there's other things that you could probably focus on, but that's neither here nor yonder. The good thing is it's providing information. Regret that more public don't participate in this forum. It's such a necessary part of our state. It is our truly, as has been said by a number of people from the senator as well as around the table, it's our future, it's our lifeblood, and it's the most important investment we can make. And I'm afraid the only way we're going to kind of turn that needle up a few notches is more public involvement, more public engagement, so that they know what's going on and will participate and understand what the issues are, particularly every other year when the session convenes and the legislature takes up your budget. So thanks for doing this, and keep up the good work, and we'll keep watching. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Somebody told me there is no Switzerland tomorrow, by the way. And thank you for being part of the President's Advisory Council. The Board of Regents had a wonderful breakfast with the President's Advisory Council this morning, so thank you for being here. Yes, sir.
I am not Switzerland. First, I'd like to thank the Regents and the Commissioner. From Kent and I both, we have a number of athletes, and in both schools, the athletes do a great job in the community and in the classroom. And we're really appreciative of the support that we get. We have a couple of games this weekend. We have some basketball games tonight, and then we have a football game tomorrow that is very important to this state. I don't need to tell you how important that is to this state. And we, as MSU, would like to come out on top, of course, and we look forward to that. But I just wanted to step up and publicly thank the Regents and the Commissioner's office for all the support that they give the athletic departments on both sides of the hill, from Kent and I both. So we appreciate all you do. Thank you.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind, for the record, just indicating to the Secretary your name.
Do I have to?
You don't have to.
Peter Fields, Director of Athletics, Montana State.
Peter, thank you for being here very much. Is there additional public comment? Is there additional public comment? This is going to seem odd, but we're way ahead of schedule, which is good. We have listed public comment on our agenda for 12:30, which is some time from now. And so as chair, I'm slightly concerned that we may have individuals who want to address the concerns before this board. And so, I believe we have some folks who wanted to address the board on concerns that come before us on occasion. We are at that point in the agenda, for those of you who just did come in, or we are taking public comment. So if you do have public comment and would like to address the board, please do feel free to come up to the lectern, tell us who you are and your affiliation, and we'd love to receive you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. And actually, I'm going to introduce Mr. Burrell in just a moment. My name is Dr. Robert Hasty. I've been appointed the Dean of the proposed Osteopathic Medical School here in Montana. And it's been a pleasure to be here today. And the need here in Montana for another medical school is profound. First of all, I think that most of us know that there's 9 counties in the state of Montana without a single physician, 12 counties without a single primary care physician. We have 52 out of 56 counties that are medically underserved in the state of Montana. We also have tremendous need throughout the region, the Rocky Mountain region. We have 2 neighboring states here without a single medical school as well. And so we, and I'll introduce Mr. Burrell in just a moment. Actually, if I could just introduce Mr. Burrell to the group. Great. Yeah, great. Great. Yeah, please do.
Mr. Chairman, Regents, thank you so much for the opportunity to spend some time with you today. As you know, we've been engaging in a process around the state over the last...
Could you state your name, please?
Sorry, Daniel Burrell.
Thank you.
Yes. We've been engaging in a process over the last 16 months to evaluate a potential opportunity of bringing a medical school to the state of Montana. In fact, we've spent a lot of time also evaluating the WWAMI program, which in many ways we view as a medical school here today. A big part of our evaluation is whether we could complement and in some ways enhance what is already happening in the WWAMI program, which we think has been, for the last 42 years, an incredibly important part of the overall fabric of what's going on in medical education in the state of Montana. My family is here today to have a discussion. Robert is here today to have a discussion. I want to let Robert speak first about some of the merits of the project and then talk about my family's involvement and what we've been doing in the state of New Mexico.
And thanks again, Mr. Burrell. So, as I said, there's this huge need for medical school, a full independent medical school here in Montana. And so part of my process is I've been hired to be the founding dean to go through a feasibility study on the process. This will be a thorough and complete, and I believe the first of its kind ever in the state of Montana, looking at what it would look like to put an osteopathic medical school here in the state. And I welcome the opportunity to do it, and I will certainly go throughout the state, engage various stakeholders in the process, and it's really, I think, a huge opportunity to serve on the needs of Montana and the entire region.
Let me tell you a little bit why we are here. 3 years ago, my family was approached by a number of community leaders, civic-minded individuals, hospital systems, and the university, New Mexico State University, to deal with some long-term ingrained challenges that we have in our healthcare delivery systems and our medical education and the doctor shortages that we're experiencing. New Mexico, in many ways, has a lot of corollaries to what's happening in Montana. We have 33 counties, of which all are designated health professional shortage areas. Montana has 56, of which 52 are designated health professional shortage areas. We have a large state, geographically the 5th largest in the nation, but when you look at sort of the geographic dispersion of our healthcare delivery systems, we're very much spread out in a similar way to how Montana is spread out. So large geographic area, but very small population centers. And the challenges of recruiting and retaining physicians within that context has been incredibly challenging. Montana, in fact, faces even bigger challenges. We have obviously a major metropolitan center in Albuquerque, and then the El Paso system, which in many ways supports southern New Mexico. You don't even have those dynamics here in Montana, which I think has made it even more challenging. And WWAMI has done an incredible job of coming in, training physicians within that dynamic, getting them out into rural and underserved communities, and ultimately has had an incredible retention ratio. So we've looked at that as a real model for the state and commend Montana State for working so well with the WWAMI program. Part of our sort of pre-feasibility study is again, not only looking at sort of the success that they've had, but potentially how we as an organization can work with them. I can tell you on a personal level, when we were brought in as a family in New Mexico to this discussion, it was how do we bring a second medical school to the state of New Mexico? And we looked at that entirely as a philanthropic initiative where we could partner with the president of the university, with the Regents, and with the faculty administration and come in and really attach ourselves to the pre-medical programs that already existed at New Mexico State. I think the realities of the cost structure around doing something of this magnitude quickly made it clear to us that this was beyond what we could do as a family or beyond what we could do as individuals, and that we were going to need partners who in a constructive way could come in and work with us to fund such an enormous commitment. And that's what we focused on for the better part of 2 years. I'm proud to say that our partners in New Mexico are nonprofits. They came in to see the need that we had, the demonstrated need that we had based on a feasibility study that we conducted there. I think Robert has mentioned that we've used Trip Ombach repeatedly to kind of look at the various dynamics both in New Mexico and here in Montana, because they really are a national leading organization in evaluating these type of situations. But we came together as a family and in partnership, in an innovative public-private partnership with the university to bring together family capital and nonprofit capital to ultimately fund the school down in New Mexico. And let me just tell you a little bit about the results we've had, because I think it's important in potentially informing what we are proposing and what we could do here. In the span of 2 years, we've gone from project idea. Oh, I'm good now, it's not here. Great. We've gone from the idea stage to the realization phase. So we have admitted our first class of 150 students. We have completed $33 million in infrastructure. In that first startup phase, we had over $87 million of economic impact, 360 construction jobs, 350 permanent jobs that were created as the school begins operations in 2016, and 7 different businesses that were created independently through the process of creating this school. So the economic impact for the community, for the state, was huge. But on the medical side, which really is our mission and really our focus, we have had per student rotations created over 3,000. We've been able to do that with 24 different hospital partners. We've created 108 AOA-approved residencies, which is the largest expansion in graduate medical education, really in the history of the region, but certainly in the history of the state. We've worked incredibly well with our partners up north, UNM, to create those programs in a regional model, which is very much what we would be looking at and proposing here. We recognize that within the state of Montana, trying to introduce a medical school that is entirely self-sufficient within the borders of the state is difficult and potentially impossible. If you want to achieve the mission of, achieve our mission, which is to bring high-quality physicians to the region, have them stay here, have them work here, begin to address the doctor shortage issues, particularly in your rural and underserved communities, we recognize that the only way to do that is to establish this school with a regional focus. And that's what we want to do. And I think if you look at what WWAMI has accomplished over the years, they've also taken a very regionalized focus. So as Robert pointed out, we are in the process of evaluating this. We are not at the point of having made a decision whether this is the right decision for us as a family or our, again, partners who would come in and help fund this project. We have had discussions with a lot of different stakeholders around the state, including many people at this table, and we found a lot of encouragement. We've also encountered a lot of concern. And I think some of those concerns are very valid and are the focus, frankly, of the feasibility study that we're now conducting, which we intend to make public and which we intend to share with our CEO partners at the hospital systems, our physician partners on the ground who really are on the front lines of the teaching aspect of what we would be doing, which is the most important, I think, in terms of the long-term impact for the state. So we want to get their buy-in, and we want to make sure that their criticisms are heard, and that ultimately, to the extent that we decide that, or make a decision to move forward with this project, that we've done it in a fully transparent way. We've done it in a way that invites comment, in a way that invites ultimately resolution of problems. So that's what we're doing, and that's why we're here. I think Robert, as a dean, brings enormous credibility to the project. This is an individual who has spent a career not only in the osteopathic field, but in the creation of graduate medical education programs around the country. He has an impeccable reputation with COCA, who would be our accreditor. I think, as he made very clear today, some of the requirements, the early requirements of looking at accreditation for a new school in Montana are going to include the hiring of a dean, the hiring of a president, and the completion of the feasibility study. And so that's where we are focused right now. And I want to, I want to kind of bring this back to an individual who's been incredibly impactful in kind of developing our thought process around this opportunity. His name is John Goodnow. You all will know him as the CEO of Benefis. He has come on through 2 resolutions, which I know he's going to discuss with you shortly here, to allow him to take the time to work with us to evaluate the opportunity within the hospital systems, not only of Montana, but within the region. And so, John, I'd like to ask you to come up to the podium. I think you can speak on behalf of the state in many ways, on behalf of your medical system, and on behalf of the accomplishments that you've had here in Montana. Is he not here yet? Ah.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, we thought he had arrived. I apologize.
Who's running this portion of the meeting?
Yeah, I would, that's a good question. Regent Sheehy, could I get a sense of how many individuals here want to participate in the public comment period? So there's 1 person that has a public comment for us. There's 2 individuals. Is there more than that? I would encourage you to come up and speak to the Board of Regents with whatever topic you'd like to discuss with us. I would remind the Regents, as well as everybody here, this is a public comment period, not a public debate period. And I would encourage you to be concise with your discussion. So if we could have the other individuals who would like to come up, we'd love to have you at the lectern. Thank you.
Good morning. I apologize that Mr. Goodnow is running late, but I'm Dr. Greg Tierney. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of Benefis Health System and President of Benefis Medical Group. It's with great excitement that I'm here with this distinguished group to endorse the development of a Montana College of Osteopathic Medicine. I was fortunate enough to be a member of the entering class of the WWAMI program here in Bozeman in 1984. I recognized then and recognize now the importance of continuing to develop regional medical education. Our medical group at Benefis has been growing rapidly over the last few years, nearing 200 providers. As we strive to meet the healthcare needs of an aging population in north central Montana, one of our biggest challenges is finding enough young, talented physicians to both expand and replace our current providers. Although WWAMI has had tremendous success here, the opportunity to have a medical training program in our own state offers such great added potential to us meeting that recruitment challenge. It represents the development of a valuable resource to Montana and our regional states. Healthcare in rural areas is unique, but one thing remains the same across the country. We need well-educated and well-trained physicians to lead our constantly evolving delivery systems. We believe the Montana College of Medicine will strive to develop these leaders, and Benefis stands ready to assist in the education and training of the next generation of providers. Thank you for your interest, and go Cats.
Thank you. Further public comment?
Good morning. Good morning. Distinguished Regents, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. I'm Dr. William R. McGregor, Great Falls, Senior Emeritus surgeon. Actually, there was one surviving surgeon older than I, but a member of the Benefits Health System Board for almost 20 years. I'd just like to share a few comments with you which are going to become a bit more extemporaneous as I see the environment I'm in and what I've already heard. Mr. Goodnow was caught in the snowstorm. The only reason that I made it, Juanita and I visited my sisters in Helena on the way down. A bit of my background so you understand my credibility and where my thoughts come from. Born and raised Great Falls, 1940, delivered by my grandfather, one of 6 doctors McGregor that Great Falls has produced. My surgical training was at the Medical College of Wisconsin. During my residency, I obtained a master's degree, and at the end of my residency, I was appointed to the teaching faculty at the Medical College of Wisconsin. Eventually offered a career in kidney transplantation and general surgical education. I chose to return to my home community of Great Falls, my boyhood dream to practice surgery. I served on the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education for Montana for 12 years under Governor's Judge in Schwinden. I'm also heavily involved as a fellow of the American College of Surgeons in teaching the Advanced Trauma Life Support course. So I've had a good exposure to medical education. A special thing in my background which is relevant to my future comments is that I am an honorary chief in the Blackfeet tribe. I have a deep feeling for and understanding of Native American needs as far as medicine is concerned. I am Chief Sun Buffalo. Just a few quick thoughts. It's, by my recollection, approximately 40 years ago that the state of California recognized the need to commonly credential and license osteopathic and allopathic physicians. I'm an allopathic physician, University of Iowa, but I've seen over my career that these two entities have merged. There's now virtually no difference. On a personal note, I was hospitalized last week at Benefits, rather ill. My wonderful care was delivered by an osteopathic physician, back to an allopathic physician. Wonderful thing. The very process of education breeds excellence. It fosters excellence, both in the instructors and in the students, but the beneficiaries are the patients who need the care. To the Native American side of things. In my long ministry at Blackfeet Community Hospital, I certainly saw undelivered medicine, badly needed medicine, fellow citizens, Native American brothers and sisters who are in need of health care. I know that there's been some skepticism. I'm aware that some of you have received a letter from the president of the Montana Medical Association. It's a very thoughtful letter. It's very well written. I would offer the thought, though, that the glass is really half full and needs to be filled further. There's immense opportunity in Montana for clinical education, for medical students and for graduate medical education, for residents and for fellows. During my many clinics at Blackfeet Community Hospital, I would from time to time see groups of physicians visiting from medical schools. They would perhaps spend 2 weeks and then they would return home. Why couldn't some of those visits come from more education right here in Montana? The answer is it obviously could if it's well done. So, I thank you for your time. I think we have wonderful opportunities before us. I think our beautiful Montana horizons are filled with sunshine and hope. I understand that there are skeptics, some doubting Thomases, perhaps some naysayers. Some think it's a pie in the sky. If it's a pie, which I doubt, I'll introduce just a little bit of lightness to this. I hope that pie is a huge, huge huckleberry pie filled with beautiful huckleberries from our forests, smothered in cream from a Gallatin Valley dairy. Thanks so much for your time.
Now I'm hungry. Thank you for being here. Is there additional public comment? Is there any additional public comment? Mr. Burrell, I get the impression that perhaps you had a couple of closing comments that perhaps you were cut off. Are you okay? Thank you for being here. Is there any additional public comment? Any additional public comment? One more time, any additional public comment?
Do you want Regent comment as well?
I don't want to get into a debate, Regent Sheehy. We typically just receive public comment. Do you have a
Public
comment?
comment. Here's my comment. I think it was just 24 hours ago that we were assured that this was not an item to be deliberated by this board. And that you assured the people in this room, Commissioner, that this wasn't before us. And there's clearly been a carefully planned presentation. We've received that presentation during public comment and told we're not to ask them questions. Your comments yesterday certainly assured that there would be no opposing viewpoint here today because everyone in this room was told this was not an issue that would come before this board. If it is going to come before the board, again, let's go back and figure out what our role is, what they're asking of us, what partnerships we're talking about, and I feel a little duped by what's gone on here. I was assured this was not an item that was coming before the board. There's a presentation before the board. If we're going to do this, I think we should do it right. I'm getting that Goldman Sachs dereg feeling right now, and I don't like it. This should be done in public. This is not us as stakeholders at this table. This is us listening to a presentation one-sided. And I feel a little duped, Commissioner, by what you said yesterday.
Thank you, Regent Sheehy. Is there any additional public comment? Any additional public comment? Seeing none. President Cruzado, any final instructions?
Yes. Well, thank you again for coming back to Bozeman. As you can tell, we really enjoy having the Board of Regents here. There are months of preparations behind each of these meetings. And with your permission, I would like to take a few minutes to recognize the wonderful staff without whom we would not be able to prepare these meetings with the attention to detail that we do. And I would like to recognize our assistant, Maggie Hammett, and the entire contingent of incredible individuals of Montana State University who get so excited every time we know that you're coming. Our students, our faculty, our staff, our alumni, community members look forward to continuing these wonderful conversations with the Board of Regents. There are meetings this afternoon, different organizations and groups. I know that you are in attendance at 2 o'clock. I think that we have the Montana Compact meeting. We also have a rehearsal this afternoon for those of you who will be joining us for the unfurling of the American flag tomorrow. If you want to join us today for rehearsal so that everybody tomorrow knows how to do that perfectly, we have invited people from not only from across the divide, but actually from every campus, so that tomorrow morning, as we get together on that field, we really communicate we are one state under one same flag. So with that, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Christian, thank you so much for coming to Bozeman.
Thank you, President Cruzado. Thank you for being a wonderful host.
And go Bobcats.
I was waiting for that. With that, thanks to everyone who is here. Thanks for everyone who has been here the last 2 days. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.